If I said he is involved in an incredible array of things, Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring Company, Neuralink, and perhaps even Twitter, you would know immediately to whom I am referring. During a recent interview at the newly opened Tesla Gigafactory, Elon Musk explained that he is driven by a moral sense of purpose. All that he does is inspired by curiosity and a desire to improve and innovate, to ensure that he feels positive rather than sad about the future. Musk says that he wants to ensure a good future for humanity, the nature of the universe, and to expand the scale and scope of consciousness. His projects in artificial intelligence, as well as his conquest to Mars, are intended to secure the future of consciousness by being a multi-planet species. Musk projects that we are heading to a world of abundance, one that will more closely integrate the human world and the digital world. He says excitement is guaranteed and suggests that if you want the future to be good, you must make it so. He predicts that by 2030, every 2 years, around 1,000 starships will be flying to Mars to build a self-sustaining city. Good morning. I'm delighted to be your program director for the 2022 Conscious Leadership and Ethics Summit. Whether the context we live in is set by the ambitions of Elon Musk, Vladimir Putin, Cyril Ramaphosa, or other leaders of our time, it is critical now, more than ever before, for the Conscious Leadership and Ethics Summit to be an integral part of our annual business calendar. We have much to explore and learn together this morning. And to help us with that learning, I'm really delighted to introduce our first speaker, the founder and former CEO of Conscious Companies. Brenda's Conscious Companies idea started as a scribble on the page in the middle of the night after she emerged from meditation. It set her on a journey that would have an impact not only on her life, but on countless other organizations in her quest to build conscious leadership capacity. Brenda tells me often that she is getting too old for all of this, and as you know, has handed over the leadership reins of Conscious Companies to Paula Abel, from whom we'll be hearing later. You may have heard last month that Kane Takana, a Japanese woman who was certified as the world's oldest person, passed away, aged 119. Not that Miss Tanaka was competitive, but she did not exceed the record set in 1997 by Jean-Louise Calment, who passed away in France at the age of 122. Apparently, she gave up smoking at the age of 117 because she could no longer see the cigarette to light it. Brenda, in comparison to Ms. Tanaka and Ms. Calment, you have your second half century to complete, and we look forward to what you do next. Please put your hands together for Brenda Carley.
Thank you, Adam. I think you've misunderstood me. I'm never too old. I always tell my children, the day I feel old, that's the day I want to die, because I have the energy of a 45-year-old. Good morning. It's wonderful to see so many faces, familiar and not so familiar here, despite the challenges outside. Thank you for making the time to be here. I will keep this brief as there are many, many speakers here today who would share their wisdom and insights with you. We are especially honored to have with us our distinguished guest, Mohanji. You know, with a presence over 90 countries, he has taken time off from his hectic schedule to be here. Please give him a round of applause. A special welcome to Dr. Jan Bellman. From Germany, he was here in 2019 and he can't resist South Africa. And a sincere welcome to our local icons, Professor Mervyn King, Professor Bonang Mohali. Is Professor King here? I haven't seen him. And not to mention our speakers and panelists and our partners, without whom this summit would not have been possible, especially Merrick Abel, CEO of PrimeServe, Bruno Oljehek from Nestle, Mikitika Sheshe from Unilever, and Richard Firth, the CEO of MIP Holdings. They have so generously given of their time and resources to support conscious companies over the years, not just for this event, throughout any initiative I've had. You know, a few weeks ago, Michael Juden, he's the chairman of the Conscious Leadership Academy, said to me, "What are you doing, Brenda? You are preaching to the converted in the room." Rightly so, because those present here today and those who have joined us virtually, whether conscious or semi-conscious, are like pebbles that create ripples in the vast, muddied waters of business and society. The terrible potentiality of humanity's ethical destitution, social upheaval, and shattered values are very real in terms of a pandemic, greed, corruption, global chaos, and the fog of violent self-interest. You know, with money, power, fame, and position, they've only seen as tangible realities, nothing else. The corporate agenda, too, driven by metrics, analytics, strategies, and the bottom line, in an over-regulated environment where BE codes, labor laws, and heavy penalties force leaders to go into a tick box mode. So much so that they have very little choice to engage or explore conscious leadership, let alone even exploring who they are themselves. However, there are exceptional leaders in this room, and many of them are partners, who try to balance both the corporate agenda as well as seek an intuitive grasp for deeper meaning and purpose, both in their personal and professional lives. There is a word in Sanskrit called anicca. There is no English equivalent for this, but it best describes the impermanence of life in every second of every day. We live, as it were, on many levels of universal rhythm and frequency. This is the nature of change. We have to let go and accept change in everything we do in order to flow with the motion of life. The comings and goings of things in this world is anicca. But there's beauty in it too. The fact that things are evolving has some hidden marvel in it. So too is the conscious company's story. As Adam said, it was born 6 years ago as a scribble on a page in the middle of the night after meditation. And when I first started talking to CEOs, process-driven pundits, and various leaders about consciousness, their eyes glazed over and they laughed at me, remarking that my head was in the clouds. I had not imagined in my wildest dreams that we would unearth a niche of conscious ethical leaders who quietly go about balancing who they truly are as human beings with what they have to do and deliver to their stakeholders and shareholders. These are our partners and finalists of conscious companies. You know, over the years, I had laughed and cried, pushed and pulled, cajoled and voluntold. This is a word Adam invented for me. He always says, when I come to him, he says, "Are you voluntolding me again?" And through it all, you have not only supported me, but you've walked this journey with me. And even though you may understand conscious leadership cognitively, Many of you still have to taste conscious leadership experientially or consciousness experientially. Like Roger Bannister did. I'm sure all of you know who Roger Bannister is. He was the first man who ran the mile in less than 4 minutes. When asked in an interview in the media how he did it, this is what he said. He said, "No longer conscious of my movement, I discovered a new unity with nature. I had found a new source of energy, power, and beauty, a source I never dreamt existed before." What he had experienced was an instantaneous new level of consciousness beyond thought. And this is what tasting consciousness experientially is about. The secret of conscious leadership is very simple. In Rumi's word, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. The tagline of Conscious Companies Awards is humanizing business one leader at a time. And that no longer serves us, as the need is much greater, and there has to be scalability if conscious leadership is to become an integral part of the corporate world. The man who often talks to me about scalability, Merrick Abel, has thrown his weight behind conscious companies, and together with Hussein Kajika, the CEO of Mail and Guardian, they had committed to take conscious companies to the next tier. My vision is that it becomes a fundamental aspect of the corporate framework, so much so that companies would and should seriously ensure having conscious ethical leadership at its helm, and that it would eventually become a requirement for most companies. The ultimate would be to originate a conscious company C Corp certification globally, born right here in South Africa, which provides very fertile soil with all our unconscious leaders. This can only be achieved if conscious companies is corporatized and scalable. I believe with your conscious continued support, this can be achieved. And with Merrick, Hussein, Paula, Guru, to steer it, it is in very good hands. To quote William Wordsworth, life is divided in 3 terms: that which was, which is, and which will be. Let us learn from the past to profit by the present, and from the present to live better in the future. This is the Conscious Company story. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Brenda. And I can absolutely admit that 6 years ago, I was one of those CEOs that glazed over when you first came to my office wearing your beautiful sari. And I sat there thinking, my goodness, who's lit her in? Now I know why. I really do. So our first speaker, Creative Director of Agni Media and Chief Trainer for the Conscious Leadership Academy, Guru Kali, has a unique approach to neuroscience and consumer behavior psychology. He has spent over 18 years as a specialist in understanding the human experience and advocating purpose, meaning, and consciousness into the corporate and socio-economic space. Please put your hands together for Guru.
Good morning. We find ourselves at an interesting time as humanity. Between climate change, World War III, looting, masks, billionaire clubs, conspiracy theories, and digital social credit systems, the list is quite long, and the human being has done quite a job on its road to success. It's possible that every generation throughout history has felt as though the challenges of their time were greater and more intense than any era before. From the empires of the Bronze Age to world wars, the plight of our current time, sitting on a precipice of survival, with impending doom looming, does seem to remain consistent. So once again, we find ourselves on a precipice, trying to wrangle the human condition as it unfolds in the moment. And for the first time in known history, enabled through exponential technological advancements, yet with the same archaic us versus them ideology that has plagued us as a species. Now, as we step out of a global pandemic, we face the next chapter of the human being story. Armed with renewed arrogance, persisting delusions of grandeur, and a few new toys, we embark on the transhuman journey, fully integrating with technology inside the body of the human being. Recently, the World Economic Forum's foremost business leader, Klaus Schwab, announced the launch of the Great Reset. Klaus has suggested the fourth industrial revolution's Internet of Bodies promises to bring a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities. And even if you ignore his James Bond appearance, the narrative itself has not done great things for conspiracy theories. Locally, we've had our hands full with our own problems. If we're hell-bent on fulfilling the prophecies of Credo Mutua, then we are certainly on the right track. Between looters and looters getting washed away in floods, we seem to have major concerns about the looting and flood relief funds being looted. Has Mandela's legacy been reduced to a kleptocracy? And have the ideals of peace and human rights been traded for tire necklaces? Our own conspiracy theorists say that human rights were buried next to the briefcase that was handed to Mandela, and it helps them inspire their narrative of us versus them. During World War II, an Austrian neurologist, Viktor Frankl, was imprisoned at Auschwitz, and he took the opportunity for observational research of his fellow human beings, to study its raw nature without influence or distraction of prominence, title, or hierarchy, but rather a situation where all test subjects were exposed to the same conditions. His findings were explicit, as the individual consciousness of each man, woman, and child was revealed in their humanity through the choices of their attitudes and subsequent behavior. Some would give away their last piece of bread as an expression of love before they died of hunger, and others would sell out their brother to their captors for the favor of a meal, yet all under the same circumstances, and irrespective of the choice made, still lying in wait for the gas chamber. Regardless of external circumstances, it is the internal consciousness of the human being that manifests externally. Whether you are given the whether you're given the title of president or you're given the title of homeless, if it is within your consciousness to loot, then you will loot. If it is within you to love, then you will love. And if it is within you to stand as a beacon of light for consciousness, we can expect you to continue to stand for truth and consciousness, whether you're in a boardroom or in a concentration camp. And yet there are methods to transform the human being at the level of the consciousness, the core, the root. Methodologies used to induce a pure state of consciousness itself beyond the experience of the five senses as the perceiver of the sense, momentarily detaching from thinking, feeling, culture, programming that we inherited from the nature through epigenetics or through indoctrination of the nurture, experienced individually from within your own worldview. And in those moments where we're able to remove those filters in our awareness or shift the lens of perception of our worldview, we are able to create a new way of being in the world, transformed. Like the overview effect mentioned by astronauts, as a moment of altered perception, sparking a sensation of oneness with the planet after seeing the Earth from a distance, from out of space. Or ancient breathing exercises from the East, Kriyas, that are able to induce moments of experiences that result in sensations of belongingness. Somatic release exercises or daily practices of consolidating the mind, removing impressions on our consciousness a layer at a time, ultimately fostering a sense of love internally. And maybe love is still too strong a word for the boardroom. Perhaps life is nothing more than a competition to be the criminal rather than the victim. Or perhaps we are more than what we have become. For centuries, scientists, philosophers, and sages have asked the question of truth and consciousness. And still, the origins of consciousness have yet to be agreed upon. From the stoned-aped theory of ancient sapiens eating psychedelic mushrooms to awaken a consciousness within, to a mysterious god or gods who bestowed the human being with their distinct abilities, the sentience of the human being has manifested vastly different from any of the other creatures that we have been exposed to on our planet. Our talents of music, poetry, and intimacy are surpassed only by our ability to slaughter, pillage, and detest. And now the business of consciousness has also been of interest to industry, with Elon Musk and his Neuralink brain implant devices, as Adam mentioned earlier, to the pharmaceutical industry's research and development of psychedelics and plant medicines, taking inspiration from the shamans of South America all the way to DMT vape pens on the beaches of LA and microdosing mushrooms in Silicon Valley. The media and content industry has also been lucrative, with fact checkers and fake news to custodians and gatekeepers of information, impacting the collective consciousness of man, weaponizing packaged versions of their own truth. But has it been to our benefit as a humanity and to human values, or has it just been to promote further us versus them ideology? As we develop tools at such a rapid pace, how can we afford not to evolve the consciousness that we are? After all, business is an expression of the human being. The human being is not a consequence of business. We have built rocket ships and skyscrapers, yet still unable to convey the simplest human expressions of love and compassion. Perhaps one method to induce transformation of the human being from anger to kindness or from separation to love is to sit in jail for 27 years. It's worked for others. How else to shift the habit pattern of the mind? As the search for truth and consciousness continues, along with Captain Jack Sparrow in search of treasure, there are considerations and questions for our panels and business leaders that we have with us today. Those who choose to drive conscientious business ventures as conscious business leaders. I wish you all an effective Conscious Leadership and Ethics Summit. Thank you for your time.
Guru, thank you very much. I was busy making notes behind the scenes there, and I kept writing down mushrooms. There is something more that I need to explore and discover. Did you know that fungi are indeed the oldest discovered ecosystem that scientists have found in the world, and that the fiber of fungi covers 90% of the Earth's surface at this stage, all interconnected by a fiber base, talking and connecting and engaging around the world. What an amazing thought to explore. So I'd like to once again welcome all of our physical attendees here at the venue in Melrose Arch. And just to let you know that you are going to be working very hard this morning, and we are unlikely to allow you to have a break during the morning. But please feel free to wander off to the restrooms when you need to. We hate to see, it does bring, I think, a renewed consciousness and focus and urgency if you're waiting for the next presentation, but please don't sit there under pressure during the morning. And then to our online participants on our YouTube channel, welcome to you. It's really wonderful to have you join us around the world and to have your participation. And indeed, our next speaker is a virtual speaker, Sadhguru. All of his efforts have always been towards just one goal: raising human consciousness Over the past 4 decades, Sadhguru has offered the technologies of well-being to millions of people across the world.
Namaskaram and congratulations and best wishes to all of you who have gathered for this Conscious Leadership and Ethics Summit in South Africa. It's my wish and my blessing that all of you as leaders of industry and business must understand that business does not exist in isolation from the rest of the world. As individual human beings, we do not exist in isolation from rest of the life. We have to breathe, we have to drink water, we have to eat food. That means air, water, soil and every other life connected with this is associated with our lives. So is the nature of a business that is built by human beings. So it's very important that a conscious leadership arises in the world at this juncture because we are at a time, we are at a cusp of time right now where if we act right now, we can turn this planet around, we can restore this planet to a reasonable sense of well-being for future generations if we act now. Otherwise, we could miss this opportunity. What am I talking about? I am talking about soil. Soil as a fundamental living substance, soil as the basis of our existence, who we are right now is just the consequence of the life that's thriving in the soil. Unfortunately, the soil degradation in the world is global phenomena. At the same time, particularly in Africa, UNFAO is saying 65% of Africa's land will be degraded in the coming decade. This is a serious concern, no matter what businesses we are building, what civilizations we are building in the world. It's extremely important that we protect the soil, which is the foundation of our life and the foundation of well-being for future generations. I take this opportunity for all of you business leaders, as you are people of capability and competence, you are people of good connections in the world. Please use your competence, capability and connections and ensure we as a generation becomes that generation which turned back from the brink of a disaster rather than a generation which slept through and fell into a disaster. Let us not be that, because this is a very dire situation. I am not here to give you a doomsday prediction. I am here to beseech you that we as a generation, if we act now, we as a generation, if we act right now, we can have the great privilege of putting solid foundation for the well-being of future generations. Otherwise, we will be denying the possibility of well-being of future generations by taking away the foundations of life, which is the soil. The loss of soil, the degradation of soil is happening at a pace where every second 1 acre of land is being lost to desertification. In the last 25 years, we've lost 10% of the planet's land area to deserts. So let's act now. All of you as conscious leadership must act to enhance this message and get the necessary policy changes in the nations in which you work. Thank you very much for having me at your conference. It's my wish and blessing that you have a wonderful time at this conference, and above all, you have the fulfillment of turning the world around towards a better life. Namaskaram to all of you.
There you have it, from the Sadhguru, that the foundations of life are soil, and it's what connects that soil that is so critical. One of the things I learned on my trip with Brenda to the ashram in Bangalore, the Art of Living, was when we visited the meditation temple, that every religion that I could possibly think of was represented around the physical environment there. And I began to really think clearly, more clearly, about both the separation and the complementarity of being spiritual and being religious. And the two can coexist in harmony or can exist separately to each other. And our next speaker, Rabbi Hudson, is the Dean of the Torah Academy and the Rabbi at Great Park Synagogue. Rabbi David Hudson has initiated outreach projects that serve destitute South Africans and also launched the annual Cycle Live, the 700-kilometer cycling ride from Johannesburg to Cape Town to promote tolerance and respect between students of different religions, cultures, and backgrounds from Soweto to Israel. Please welcome Rabbi David Hudson.
A couple of decades ago, I went to hike the Grand Canyon. I was driving from Flagstaff to the Hoover Dam, and the terrain was flat. It was desert. There were highways through the sand. It seemed the most perfect situation to drive in. And on the side of the roads, I kept seeing the signs. Headlights on, dangerous highway. Eventually, we came to the Hoover Dam. I stopped a police officer, and I asked him, what's this dangerous highway? How could this be a dangerous highway? You could land an aeroplane on these highways. And he said, young man, which I was at the time, on this highway, people fall asleep at the wheel. And I thanked him for that insight into the roundabouts, the ups and downs, and all of the challenges that we go through in life. They are meant to awaken something in us, to dream, to think differently, and not, God forbid, to fall asleep at the wheel. I so thank Brenda and all the organizers for this event for giving me this opportunity. She asked me if there was an epiphany in my life that brought me to want to get involved with communal leadership, and that's been on my mind for the last few weeks. I've been thinking about this a lot. And there isn't. What really motivated my journey into communal responsibility was a parent, a role model. And very briefly, my father was born in the city of Gomel in Ukraine, much in the news today. He's lost his father when he was 3. He was raised by an uncle who was sent to Siberia because he taught Judaism. My father, at the age of 17 in 1924, realized the only place that he could try and act as a Jew was to leave the environment then. He lost his whole family there in Russia, moved through Poland, eventually to Latvia. Just before the war, he was given a job in Sweden, and so he survived the war. But his entire family in Libava were taken out on the 15th of December 1941. The entire family, and were shot. He was left with one person in his entire life, his then wife. She needed a dry and warm climate. He therefore moved from Sweden, where he was in the hub of post-war activity in trying to save as many people as he could. And he landed up in the metropolis city of Warmbads, where I was born, known as Bella Bella. His wife passed away 6 months later, and a year later he met my mother, and he started over. And he raised us as children in a family that was so grateful. We were never victims. He never spoke about victimhood. He never spoke about what he had been through in the sense of the tragedy as much as he spoke about the need to work, to impact, to make a difference. Not fair was never part of our vocabulary. It always was, what can we do? And as a result of that, my siblings, myself, all went into teaching. All my children are involved in teaching. And I'm so proud that that is how they have decided to live their lives. And it is the impact of a mentor, somebody who was my role model. And our challenge is to be the role models to the people who are looking at us and other people in leadership so that they can have positive experiences. And I want to share a few thoughts about another role model who lived a little bit before that, and that is my mentor Moses, who we call in our Jewish teachings Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, although he lived thousands of years ago. He impacts on our life every single day. And I try to find a few specific core elements of leadership that he represents then and today and tomorrow. The first event of his life that became part of his journey of leadership was that he was in the palace of Pharaoh. Vayigdal ha'ish, and he grew up. Vayetze lechav, and he went out to his brothers. We are taught that that is not just a sequential approach to understanding Moses' journey that was definitive. When did he grow up? When did he emerge? When he left the palace and he went out to see what was happening with his brethren. Because as long as he was isolated in some ivory tower, unaware of the suffering of others, he was still a child. We grow up when we leave our comfort zones to recognize the needs of others. Vayifen kovako, and he looked this way and that way. Vayarki ein ish, there was no man. And he saw one person trying to kill another, and he intervenes. Our sages tell us that he looked this way and that way. He saw no man, because often in life we look around and nobody is standing up for the underdog. There is no person, there is no adult, there is no responsible person who cares enough. And what do we do then? We need to rise to the occasion and be inspired people, notwithstanding that we are surrounded by mediocrity or people who have fallen asleep at the wheel. Moses was a shepherd, and the underlying element of leadership as we see it in his life was not political acumen, was not brilliance in how to respond to crises. He was a shepherd. He cared for every one of his flock. That is the foundation of leadership. Acumen can be acquired as we go through life. But the underlying feature of leadership has to be a shepherd, as King David was and so many other great leaders. And when he stood at the burning bush and God said to him, "You are the leader and you will take out this people," his response was, "Mi anochi, who am I? I have a speech impediment. I'm not the right person. Try somebody who's better than me." Because leadership and great leadership is born not when people think that they are the greatest and that they have every talent and ability to impact on the world. When we recognize our flaws and we are aware of our deficiencies and nevertheless we respond to the call of the hour, leaders should not be the people who advertise themselves on the polls as being the greatest gift to humankind and the people able to transform the world. It is maybe the shy individual who is looking past their deficiencies that might be the greatest next leader. And then Jethro arrives and he says, you have to delegate. You cannot be a leader that's going to do it all yourself. And you have to find people who are honest, sonei vatsa, who hate illicit gain. My father used to say, how do you find somebody who hates money? He said, for money you can get anything, even somebody who hates. So there he was, delegating, ensuring that everybody would be in the position that would be honest and appropriate. And then the golden calf, and God says, I've given up on this people. And we will build a new people from you, Moses. We need a brand new beginning. And Moses turns to God, which I believe to be his quintessential moment of greatness as a leader. Not when he stood on Sinai, and not when he split the seas, but when he said to God, God, wipe me out of your book if you refuse to forgive my people. I am my people. I'm for my people. This is not about me. I'm ready to give up everything and to be taken out of your document, your holy Torah, which I've given my life for. Remove me if you do not forgive my people. I am my people. I am for my people. That is what defines my very existence. And then came the sanctuary, and he had the most successful monetary drive, financial drive, to have all the requirements for the temple. Probably the only one in history where they actually turned to the people and said, enough, don't give 1 cent more, we have everything that we need. But immediately after that, vast sections, chapters of our holy Bible and Torah are dedicated to an accounting. Where was it spent? How was it gained? Where was it utilized? Every single cent was accounted for, because Moses, notwithstanding his stature and his spiritual accomplishments, stood accountable, responsible, and giving over that account to the people around him. And then came the question of succession. And when there was a need for a new leader because his hope of reaching the promised land was not to be, his main request was that my people will not be katsoin asher ein lahem ra'eh, they should not be like a sheep, like a flock without a shepherd. It wasn't his son, it wasn't his cousin, it wasn't jobs for pals. Moses handed over to the best person who was able to lead for the next generation. And when he addressed that next generation, which is the entire book of Deuteronomy, it's interesting, we have 4 books and then a 5th book. The 5th book repeats a lot of the things that have been said before, but this time he's talking to a different generation. The first 4 books were about those who had suffered in Egypt, the history, the people who came from suffering. Now there was a new generation. They were destined to find the promised land. This was a generation of the future. And Moses knows how to address them. He knows that they need a different language. They need a new dream. They can't just be defined by the suffering of the past. They have to be defined by the opportunities of the future. One of my favorite books is The Little Prince, and Antoine de Saint-Exupéry says that if we want to build a ship, don't drum up the people to gather wood, to assign tasks. Teach them to dream of the open sea. Let us not fall asleep at the wheel. Let us dream about a better future. Thank you.
Rabbi Hasdan, thank you very, very much indeed. Really wonderful to hear about your own journey to community responsibility and the question that clearly we need to ask ourselves, what can we do? And that challenge to be the role models, to intervene, to rise to the occasion, given that we are surrounded by people that have fallen asleep at the wheel. And one thing that really struck a chord with me is that personally, I firmly believe that if you have an opportunity to take a leadership role, the number one priority in taking that leadership role is to ensure succession. And if you're not willing to deal with the succession issue up front, then you shouldn't take the leadership role at the very beginning. So many lessons, I think, for us to learn from. Thank you very much again. Our next speaker is a fellow immigrant to South Africa, and I must say, Jackie and I have been in South Africa for now 25 years. We came here for 2, and by now we've completely overstayed our welcome. And I must admit, it's beginning to feel a little bit like that. Things like Operation Dudula really bringing into focus that South Africa is not a welcoming place to fellow Africans or anyone, for that matter, who's not born in South Africa. And it creates a massive point of friction, which I think is absolutely diabolical and disastrous for our future, and something that we need to deal with. Bruno Oliahoek, CEO of Nestlé for Eastern and Southern African region, believes in the power of his people and is a champion of creating shared value initiatives to strengthen the business and to build trust. Please welcome Bruno Oliahoek. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bruno Oliahoek, and let me start by introducing myself and my family in this picture that was taken in the Netherlands, where I grew up. So here in the picture you can see me beginning of my adult life with my parents and my wife. So when Brenda asked me to speak, she asked me to define, in my opinion, what does consciousness and conscious leadership look like. And it reminded me of 1995, when the United Nations celebrated its 50th year. And as part of those celebrations, they asked students to come to Geneva to discuss with them the next 50 years. And I had the honor of representing my university in Bordeaux, France, in those celebrations. So they took us around the different United Nations agencies and their agendas. And then at the end, they asked all the students for their pledge. And I remember my pledge, which was that I intended to work for Nestlé in the developing world, and that through my presence there, I would like to contribute positively through my household, through my company, through my community. And you can see from that pledge that I consider myself a doer more than a dreamer. And I want to, instead of fixating on the definition, focus more on the impact. But still, I try to reflect and think about why is it that I think about consciousness the way I do. And I believe that it's actually due to my upbringing in the Netherlands. And I'll give you 3 little stories that kind of explain why I feel the way I feel. So I grew up in a little town next to Rotterdam called Barendrecht, where in Rotterdam the football club is Feyenoord. And of course all the boys playing together, they were always singing the theme song of this club Feyenoord, which is Hand in Hand Kameraden, which is loosely translated to something like, you know, let's do it together, my friends. And in that theme song, there's one sentence that gets repeated 8 times. And that is geen woorden maar daden, that you can see here, which obviously translates to, it's not about the words, it's about the deeds. So that's the first thing that I think stuck with me. The second one is actually from my name, my family name, Olierhoek. Hoek means corner, so it's a corner in a polder called Olier. And the polders are obviously reclaimed land, where the Dutch took land from the sea, and so it's only protected by a dike. And so everybody that lives in a polder automatically has a common enemy, the sea. And it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, if you're old or young, male or female, everybody has to work together and be on standby to reinforce the dike whenever needed, because we're all in it together. So from that you can see that collaboration is something that has stuck with me. And the third one is the Dutch entrepreneurial spirit and their innovation. And indeed, back in 1602, the first company was born in the Netherlands when several merchants came together to fund their expeditions to do trade with Mongol India. But what I find interesting is that all the companies later on that wanted to get their operating license had to be able to prove and to demonstrate how their operations, how their actions would contribute positively to the world. So the companies were conscious from the start. So putting it together, you can see how I define conscious companies, and that's basically when people come together to willingly cooperate and take personal actions to contribute positively to society and to our world. So I believe it's important to be intrinsically motivated. Not only focus on the end results, which in business terminology we call the lagging KPIs, but also to focus on how to get there, how to get those results, which are the leading KPIs. So in other words, my plea today is to all of you to be a leader and not a laggard. All right, so after I finished my university, what happened to my pledge? Indeed, I did go and work for Nestlé, and indeed in the developing world. I started in 1995 in Indonesia. I spent 15 years in Southeast Asia first, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, a short stint in our head office. Then I moved to Africa, Central Africa for a couple of years, then Pakistan, Afghanistan for a couple of years, and since 2018, I'm indeed the managing director for Nestlé in the East and Southern Africa region. So as Nestlé, I believe that we are very much aware of the impact that we can and should have in our value stream, both upstream and downstream and in the whole ecosystem in which we work. And so I would like to illustrate that with some concrete projects and things that we're doing. Of course, first of all, I have to start by saying that while it's true that we're into manufacturing and distribution of food and beverages, we are all, as Nestlé employees, driven by our purpose, and guided by our values that are rooted in respect. And the Nestlé purpose, as you can see here, is to unlock the power of food, so on the soil, and we are working with our dairy farmers towards net zero emission dairy. And our first project and our first farm, we started to work on this, is in Schimmelkrans, close to George, and that project is well on its way, making fantastic progress, and early next year it will be the first farm in Africa, dairy farm, that will be net zero emissions. Then I'll give you one example in one of our factories. This is our factory in Babilechi, where we're working on capturing the emissions from our boiler house and turning it into a food-grade baking soda. So you can see that the emissions can be put to good use. A groundbreaking project. And then downstream, we have a very interesting project where the spent coffee ground from our Nescafé production is used to not just throw away or burn and get a little bit of energy back from it, but to grow highly nutritious mushrooms. And this whole process is done by ladies that we've trained up, and they can sell the mushrooms and earn a living from that. And another project, this is a project from Zimbabwe that we call ZWEB, which is Zimbabwe Women Empowered in Business, where previously unemployed ladies, and we have now hundreds of those ladies, are trained up and have now their own business where they're selling the affordable, accessible Nestlé nutritious products in their neighborhoods. And then the last project that I want to briefly talk about is a project called Hatcher, where we're working with African entrepreneurs as we are trying to move from selling just branded products to selling branded experiences. So this whole digital arm around our products, the African entrepreneurs are very much advanced and much better at it than us, so we're working with them to work on that. And then in closing, I would like to share with you something that Adriana Marais, a South African scientist, has shared with my senior leadership. And that is that she was part of Project Mars 100. 100 scientists that would get a one-way ticket to Mars and set up the road for mankind. And in fact, she was demonstrating to us how already today, with the technology that exists already today, we can survive on Mars. So obviously that got me thinking that if we can survive on Mars where there's absolutely nothing, by comparison, if you look at our world with all the resources that we have, surely we can find all the solutions to our problems, as long as there is a will to do so, to collaborate together, to take personal actions, as long as there's consciousness and conscious companies. Thank you very much.
Bruno, thank you very much. I know you are all thinking the same thing that I am. Are there mushrooms on Mars? Is there that fungi fiber? Well, we know that Elon Musk is going to find out for us before anybody else. Bruno, I really enjoyed listening to you. As you said, it's not about the words, it's about the deeds. And that wonderful reflection on the sense of community and protecting the dike, how people can come together and be intrinsically motivated. We need the same collaboration, the same engagement for ourselves here. I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Mikateko Setshe. Mikateko is the Group Vice President of Unilever for Finance. Mikateko is passionate about sustainable, purpose-led growth and strives to be a cultural architect for equality, diversity, and inclusion. Please welcome Mikateko.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very honored today to represent Unilever, a company that really believes that people with purpose will always thrive, that brands with purpose will grow ahead of other brands, and that companies with purpose will last. Unilever is really a purpose-led and future-fit organization, and we believe that our purpose is to make sustainable living a commonplace. This is why we are in business, for the benefit of the communities that we serve, and this is why we strive for superior performance. With over 130 years of pioneering and innovative brands, which started with famous brands like Sunlight and Lifebuoy, supporting the fight against cholera epidemic in 1894, purpose and conscious leadership has always been at the heart of what we do. We want to do good for our planet and society and not just less harm. There is no doubt that the world faces economic and social challenges, which were certainly exacerbated by the impact of COVID-19 and the resultant intermittent lockdowns. If there's anything that COVID-19 has taught us, it is the importance of humanity and valuing life. This is why safety continues to be our #1 priority, the safety of our teams and the safety of our communities that we serve. The fragility of life was exposed by the devastation caused by the pandemic through hospitalization and deaths of millions of people around the world. I want to believe that not a single person in this room has not been affected, either directly or indirectly. In South Africa, the pandemic further exposed poverty and economic divide in the country, resulting in significant job losses and the worst GDP decline in nearly 4 decades. However, even before COVID-19, the economic growth had been sluggish, hardly enough to create the conditions needed for sustainable employment, let alone poverty alleviation. We have a big task ahead of us as social and economic partners to identify and implement solutions to boost growth, create jobs, sustainable jobs, and improve the lives and livelihoods of our people. As an advocate for equality, diversity, and inclusion, I believe that skills development is one of the key areas that both government and business can and should be collaborating to develop the right skills needed for South Africa to be competitive on a global scale while accelerating SMMEs in our markets. In this regard, at Unilever, we have continued to invest in skills and development, which includes developing talent across our workforce, fronting into racial inequalities, as well as accelerating the representation of Africans and colors in our leadership teams and amplifying Black females in leadership positions. I believe that skills development is like education, an equalizer. As we say at Unilever, the world has never had a clearer view of social and environmental challenges that face all of us. The need for action has never been greater, not only for Southern Africa, but across the world. We cannot achieve our purpose to make sustainability a commonplace and ensure that we protect the earth if we approach these challenges in a piecemeal way. Sustainability is no longer a nice to have, but a commitment that should be the foundation of each company's growth and success. A foundation in which corporate has to consider the impact of its activities on all stakeholders, from the community to the environment, the markets, and more importantly, the people that we serve. Conscious leadership must be what aligns purpose, people, and profit in service of all stakeholders. I'm confident that in this room and beyond, we are all advocates for ethical behavior. So let us dare to dream. More importantly, let us dare to take bolder actions and ensure that we lift as we rise to create a better South Africa and planet for all. This is a non-negotiable strategic imperative for our business, and I'm confident it will be for you too. I thank you.
Mikiteko, thank you very much. Well, there you have it. Two of the largest and most profitable consumer products businesses in the world. You've heard from Bruno and from Mikiteko. It's clear that those businesses wouldn't be in business without profit. And it's vital, though, to really understand the role that purpose has in really driving and motivating beyond profit. And I'd like to suggest that purpose without profit is admirable, but clearly not sustainable. But profit without purpose in today's world is meaningless. So really, we've got to be motivated to do more. I'm absolutely delighted at this stage to introduce and welcome renowned global guru of governance, Professor Mervyn King. He is Chairman Emeritus of the King Commission and founder and patron of the Good Governance Academy. Mervyn's contribution to governance principles around the world is peerless. Please welcome Professor Mervyn King.
Thank you very much, Adam, for the introduction. I thought this was a virtual event, hence I arrived late. My apologies for that. In the middle of the 19th century, wealthy families were providing capital to organizations, companies, which had unlimited liability, for them to use that money as working capital. The wealthy families started balking against doing this because when the business failed, they were still liable to the creditors and the employees. Lord Gladstone and other thought leaders at the time said, why don't we, the government of the United Kingdom, develop an artificial person with limited liability? Then the wealthy people can get a share of that and will issue a certificate to say they have that percentage of the company. And so the concept was born. It was heavily opposed by the clergy. Lord Thurlow, who was a leading clergy at that day, said famously in 1866, "Who are we to create a person? Only Almighty God can create a person. Who are we to create a person that has no mind, no heart, no soul, and no conscience?" He was right. The limited liability company that is formed today has no heart, no mind, no soul, and no conscience. In fact, it cannot operate until you, as individuals, are appointed its directors. And when something goes wrong, the wrath of society should not turn against the company, because by definition, the company is an incapacitated person. It's like a child, and the directors are the guardians of this child, the steward of their assets. The wrath of society should turn against those corporate leaders and not against the company. In Australia 2 years ago on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, I gave a talk about the innocent company. There is no company in the world that has done anything wrong, but its leaders have committed wrongs. And the most important quality of a leader is to be conscious of the relevant facts and circumstances pertinent to the business of the company. I heard Adam speak about purpose. Today, corporate leaders have to know what the purpose of the business is. And what is the definition of purpose? It's profitable solutions without having adverse impacts on people and planet. And if they are adverse, do these corporate leaders have a plan to mitigate or ameliorate those wrongs? If not, I, as the trustee of your pension fund, should not continue to invest your money in the equity of that company. Today, the great asset managers and asset owners no longer ask the question, how much money has the company made? Of course, that's important. But the critical issue is, how has the company made its money? If it's made its money subsidized by society and the environment, it's made no contribution to society. And when you think back, the description I very briefly gave you to the formation of the limited liability company, it was formed by society, its representative, the government, for society, to be used as a platform to raise capital and create jobs. But its brain, its mind, its heart, its soul, its conscience, its stewardship, its guardianship depends on the individual leaders. You have to be conscious, corporate leaders. Otherwise, you will have a company that is not recognized by right-thinking people. So purpose has become a critical issue. And the question of how the money is made is now the critical issue. In the capital markets of the world today, a financial due diligence is not the only thing that is done by the asset owners and asset managers. An ESG diligence is done, environmental, social, and governance. And I'm proud to say they use the King 4 as a method of that accountability. They ask questions of the community in which the company operates. What is the legitimacy of the operations of this company? Do you have trust and confidence in this company? Why do you have that trust and confidence? Etc., etc. So money today, you look at the collection of money in funds today, it's made up in the main of companies that are following these ESG principles. The makeup of the market capitalization of companies on the great stock exchanges of the world today, only 20% is reflected as additives in a balance sheet. The rest are going to be purported in sustainability reports and eventually in an integrated report. So conscious corporate leadership is critical. Thank you.
Prof. Mervyn, thank you so much. That really has, I think, helped us at this stage of our proceedings to really bring into focus the role of corporate leaders and the consciousness and purpose that we need to be adopting and the impact that we have on society, on the environment, on the economy. And as I heard you say, trust is absolutely critical if we are to build those businesses from a successful platform. Our next speaker is a very good friend, Richard Firth. Richard is the CEO of MIP Holdings, an organization that clearly is a business that drives profit with purpose. He is an erudite, visionary, and a resolute leader in the South African technology space. He is committed to nurturing talent, including skills, mentorship, and financial support. Please welcome Richard Firth.
Humbled to stand here today in front of all the esteemed leaders talking about conscious companies. We're just a small company. Someone put our name forward to Brenda in one of the competitions Brenda was running, and we did fairly well. But it's not that I could stand up and say I'm a conscious leader. It's just the way we live. I think it would be arrogant for me to stand here and say that. But I wondered, what do I say to such an audience? And circumstance actually gave me my subject this week when our business got our BBBEE level 1 accreditation. Yeah. Isn't that the ultimate big tick in South Africa? And we didn't go out consciously going for that level 1, but it just happened. And that's when I realized the way we run our business, the way me and my leaders who work with me run our business actually gave us that accreditation. It wasn't a conscious thing that we went out and did, but it was all the little things that we were doing that amounted to that accreditation. Quite a few people have come to me and said to me, well, how much of your business did you have to sell? And it's amazing, but we didn't. And they said, well, surely it's impossible to get to a level 1 without selling your business. And that's actually not, when you really understand it, it's not that. If you're running a conscious business, it comes. And we focused as a business on quadruple P, reporting, people, planet, profit, and purpose. And profit, everyone knows. But we took each one of those P's and we really defined them. And we said, well, we're a technology company. How do we use technology? We all know what happens to money that gets given to people, hey? In South Africa especially. Money just disappears. But technology, we could do something. And circumstance, once again, introduced us to Mara, the CEO of an NGO called Tears. And we used our technology. We realized Tears was looking after 88,000 abused people. An NGO looking after all these people, but everything was reduced to paper files and writing. So we actually used our skills to build a system where we could track and trace the perpetrator, the victim, even the police officer. And now what we can do is take that data and start saying, well, do you really want that police officer looking after your case? What is the outcome going to be? And so going live with that system was really important to us. As the people side of our quadruple P reporting, because we are gathering immense amounts of data, and we've had some really good people, professors at universities, coming to us and asking to get access to that information now to really define where the scourge is going. But our system is making a difference, and I'm hoping what's going to happen next is we'll get more and more NGOs coming on. It's not about money. It's actually about getting the data that could make a difference to anyone who's involved in that area. And then on the planet side, we looked at our business and said, well, from a South African perspective, we see all these businesses really battling with the issues that people are talking about our planet at the moment. But isn't tourism such a big thing? And what's going to be the single biggest impact to tourism is the rhino. We might lose one of our big 5. So what we did was we started funding and actually participating in getting the vests for these very special sniffer dogs, American bloodhounds, that are making phenomenal arrests. As a matter of fact, the Kruger from external, the Kruger now has very limited poaching taking place. Most of the poaching is taking place from internal people inside the organization. It's crazy how things have actually shifted. But these dogs can maintain the scent for up to 4 days. And we got technology vests because some of the dogs go missing. They're so quick on the scent that we needed stuff to be able to track the dogs and retrieve the dogs once they'd got to poachers. And I was with a dog last week that has gone through its 500th arrest. So it's unbelievable the difference these little guys are making. And when we looked from a quadruple P perspective, that was somehow, that's what's going to make a difference to our country in the planet space. So taking each one of these elements as a business, we're not a listed entity. I'm not forced to do it by regulation or whatever the case might be. We do it as the way we live. And, you know, one of the defining things for me was my dad always said to me, never lend, never borrow. If you want to give, give it, and it'll come back in another way. And this triple BEE level 1 accreditation was a really proud moment in our life because we knew we're doing something right in our country. On the purpose side, because we're technology, we didn't just go to market. We've got about 500 people, of which the majority are software engineers. But as you know, there's a dire shortage of software engineers. So we built our own internship. We got our own trainers. We built an online method to evaluate people's way of thinking. We built a game that someone can play 22 levels. Once you've been through all the levels, you're actually writing a program for us. And we can see whether you'll be a program or not. When you finish the 22nd level, we've timed you and we've seen your quality, and you'll get an email from us welcoming you for a few more tests. But we now have more than 400 young people through the program, made a massive difference to our empowerment program. 95% of the people through the program were African from very, very rural areas, and all of them earning an average of more than 30,000 Rand a month. So the program has been phenomenally successful, and now what we need to do is grow it. In a world that's desperate for software engineers and a country that's got so many desperate people that need work. But Brenda, thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate it, and thanks for listening.
Thanks, Richie. Rich, thank you very much. As we heard, never lend, never borrow, give. And it's clear that MIP Holdings are developing systems that do drive better behavior. And just thinking about that, as I was sitting listening to Richard, my Apple Watch was alarming to me, saying, stand up. Because if I don't stand up, I'm going to lose points with Discovery Vitality. So that's a system that could drive better behavior. So you've all been misbehaving at this point. Our next speaker is actually a virtual speaker. So why not take the opportunity during the next video to, if you would like to, stand up, and you can even practice a quick bastrika if you want to. Raise your hands up and pump the air and make sure that your lungs are full and that you are super conscious. Our next speaker is Sri Prataji. She is co-founder of the World Enlightenment Center and is a philosopher and mystic whose purpose is to awaken human consciousness from suffering to peace, separation to connection, and division to oneness.
I'm glad to be part of the Leadership and the Ethics Summit 2022. A European sage from the world of science once said, "No problems can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created the problem." If we were to take an authentic look at our own lives and also the world around us, we will see that there is so much unhappiness, so much division, conflict, war, separation, and so much selfishness. And no matter what progress we make, it is the same consciousness that is manipulating, that is destroying the progress we are actually creating. Every ism is becoming an instrument of war and exploitation. We are today trying to go to Mars. Do you not see that we're already talking about buying, acquiring real estate in Mars? Already the divide, the competition, the comparing mind has touched Mars, even before we could even set foot there. We have created metaverse, supposedly a dream world. But can you see it is the same competition, same greed, same ambition, same self-centeredness that is there also in the metaverse? Whether we lived for 100 years or 1,000 years, whether we travel on a yacht or in a public transport, unless and until you become enlightened, unless and until your consciousness moves towards oneness, nothing would really matter. With an unliberated, fettered, suffering consciousness, there is no joy even if you're married to the best person. There is no fulfillment even if you have achieved the greatest in life. So what is enlightenment? Enlightenment is the ultimate human achievement. It also needs to become the most important quest of your life as conscious individuals who want to be part of making this world a better world. Enlightenment is the one human aspiration that remains unchanged. It has stayed with us through war and peace, through drought and prosperity. It's humankind's greatest quest, and it is also the oldest one. In the past, religion, race, language, culture may have perpetrated division. But in connecting to the oldest human desire and nurturing it, we have found the catalyst that is necessary and that will serve the cause of unity. And in finding enlightenment, we would have finally found the unity that we as a race urgently need. Enlightenment is a state where every form of division has ceased. It is oneness. I wish every one of you will awaken to oneness and unity and be a part of the critical mass of humanity that can shift our collective human consciousness to peace. I bless that this summit can be an instrument for greater peace, greater harmony, and oneness in the world. Namaste.
To relay, I think, to the conference at this stage, and to really think about those new frontiers, not only our role on our planet today, but the Mars and the metaverse, and the future that holds, and the threat and the challenge that it represents. And to hear Sri talk about consciousness as a catalyst and enlightenment and unity, and to put into context perhaps the discussions earlier on about the triple P of business and the focus of business and the purpose of business to achieve impact and fulfillment. So our next speaker it's wonderful to see a return to the summit. And Jan is founder of the Conscious Leadership Academy in Germany. Dr. Jan Bellerman was here at that last summit and returns to South Africa to explore new perspectives and inspire leaders to reinvent their ways of thinking and decision-making. Please welcome Dr. Jan Bellerman.
Thank you. Wonderful, good morning. Well, let me step down here. I think there's one thing that unites all of us in this room. And that is the wish to make this world a better place. And therefore, I would really like to express my deepest gratitude to all of you coming here, spending your efforts and time so that we can join the forces to really make a difference. So thank you so very much. And that's also the title of the talk today, How to Make a Difference Every Minute. As conscious leaders, we have many duties. We have to be financially successful, we have to save the planet, we have to take care of people. So let's find out how our people are. Gallup is taking a survey and surveying thousands of employees around the globe every year. And one of the questions they ask is, how do you feel every day at work? And the surprising result then is that 43% of our employees are telling us that a lot during our day we are stressed. A lot during our day we worry, with 41%, followed by sadness and anger. And the South African numbers you can see to the right. It's 41 for stress, 37 for worry, 26 for sadness, and 20 for anger. And if you look at the trend, what we can see here, over the past 10 years, worry has gone up by almost 50%, and the stress by almost 34%. So what we can say is, our employees are suffering, many of them. And what can we do to make a difference now? We are not only doing differences by words or deeds. We had so many good examples already about the deeds. But we also are making a difference through our emotions. If you look at this, you can see, for an emotion like frustration, you can see how erratic our heartbeat looks like. And for the appreciation, a positive feeling like appreciation, you can see how periodic our heartbeat looks like. So far, so good. That's not so surprising. But what is getting surprising is if we really understand that our heart is creating such a big electromagnetic field. And this field is so wide, you can even measure it after 35 meters or 115 feet. And it is so strong that it could permanently light a 5-volt bulb. So please be clear, you radiate all the time, with all our emotions, all the time. So what's the impact of it? Let's look at our impact on others. The first row is a dog. That's the heartbeat of a dog, and below you can see the heartbeat of the boy. They are in different rooms in the building. And then the boy enters the room where the dog is. And they start to play, they start to love each other. And you can see the heartbeat, how it's changing. It's getting so wonderful here. And what you can see here is, in this time, they are creating a field of love. And you can really measure it. You can see that. And at the end, when the boy is leaving the room, the field collapses. So we need to be very clear that we always broadcast our emotions. We are all sitting here next to each other. Just think about how many people you are meeting every day on your way to the office, in the office. If you have a diameter of 70 meters or 230 feet, how many people are sitting in your field? And we are influencing them. And we could either influence them in a negative way or in a positive way. And what we know from Daniel Goleman's research is that if the people are sitting together in a room for about 15 minutes, after 15 minutes, the heartbeat is aligned, the blood pressure is aligned, and if strangers are sitting in a train and are sharing a room there, and they just sit and then don't talk to each other, after a while, the strongest emotion of the people sitting there has been transmitted to all the others. So if you have ever experienced the situation that you suddenly felt sad or anger or something without even knowing where it comes from, it could be from somebody around you. So the big question is now, how do we create this positive field? Especially at the workplace where we would like it. Because what we know from the neuroscientists, if our brain is operating in a positive field like this, we are a lot more productive, we have much more access to our intelligence. So how can we do this? Are you up for a short experiment? In just 3 minutes, we will create in this room a big field of love. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, we give it a try. First of all, please close your eyes or stare, if you're more comfortable with it, stare at the point in front of you. Take one finger and point it at your heart region, please, so that you feel the center of your chest or your heart. And please imagine you are breathing in and breathing out through that point. And while breathing in, please count till 2. 1, 2. And while breathing out, please count till 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's do this in 3 cycles again, please. And now, please recall a moment when you felt love, either with a family member, or a friend, or a pet, or a lovely place where you have been. Feel that love again. And then expand this love from your heart to the rest of your body. And then expand this love to the people around you. And finally cover the whole room, the whole hall here, please. And then please put a smile on your face and open your eyes. And look at the faces around you and next to you, how they feel. Thank you so much for being so brave and trying it. Last slide. This is really the takeaway, which I would love you to take away. You are always making a difference. If you want it, or if you don't want it. If you are aware, or if you're not aware. You are making a difference. The only thing what you can decide is if you are either fueling the suffering of the employees that we have seen, or if you are creating a positive field of love and appreciation, it's your choice. And now you have no excuses anymore that you don't know about it. So please think about what you want to stand for, and big thank you for your attention.
Jan, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I was doing that behind the screen here. I could feel the energy coming from the room and coming behind the screen. I think there's so much to be said about, as you were saying, Jan, making a difference through our emotions and radiating energy all the time. And with that context, our next speaker is someone that just is like a little nuclear reactor in a very small packet, not that small, but comes a massive force of energy. And whenever I hear him talking on the radio or being interviewed on the TV or have an opportunity to engage with him in person, I feel my battery getting charged. I feel the energy really coming into play. So Professor Banang Mahale, President of Business Unity South Africa, the Apex Business Network organization, Vice Chancellor of the University of the Free State, and many, many others. I'm sure we could spend much more time. But Professor Mahale is known as much for his patriotism and his active role in seeking to advance the country's interests as he is about ethical leadership, transformation, social justice, people development, constructive collaboration, and integrity. He is the author of Lift As You Rise and Behold the Turtle, a compilation of some of his spoken and written words, thinking, and direction. Please put your hands together for Professor Banang Mahale.
Yeah, I just asked for a handheld because we are running a few minutes late, so I thought maybe just a few sound bites. Is it possible to release better humans? Because otherwise, a conversation around conscious leadership will indeed be empty. It is tautologous because leadership cannot be anything else other than conscious. It can't be anything else other than ethical. But for emphasis, we do talk about ethical leadership at a time that South Africa is in a spot of bother. So on Thursday, we hear at one university, Stellenbosch, a good friend of mine, Justice Edwin Cameron, is a chancellor, that a female student was spoken to in less than building and creating terms. On Sunday at 4 in the morning, another student breaks into another's room and urinates on his paraphernalia. Congratulations to the university for having acted quite boldly, incisively, to deal with this matter. So the outcome is going to affect all of us. But this is just emblematic of the pain that all of us live under. And as business, are there 2-3 things that we can do maybe that can make the world a better place and be able to affect the type of leaders that we are creating today so that we can begin to impact tomorrow, to have both an outsized and oversized impact. Especially at a time that South Africa is holding the world record for all the wrong reasons. The most unequal society in the world. We just took over from Brazil in 2010 with a Gini coefficient of 0.6. The country with the highest unemployment in the world at 46.6%. We say on an expanded definition, 750 days of national lockdown, there is no expanded definition. There's only one definition. Half the population is unemployed. A country with the highest youth unemployment in the world at 75%, when young people of military age are sitting at home twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do. Not only are we asking for trouble, but we are actively inviting it. The country with the highest small and medium enterprise failure rate in the world. The country with the highest femicide rate in the, not by a factor of 2, but 5 times the global average. So we can see that we are a people in pain in that environment. How then do we produce and liberate better humans that can deeply connect in a very meaningful way, in a very profound manner, not to be self, but to be the other-centered. Leadership that is beyond just the self. The leadership that says, I find meaning and purpose by looking at you and seeing you as a reflection of myself. I am because you are. That's what it means to be genuinely human. At a time that business in this country is twice as trusted as government. How do we leverage this trust that has just been extended to us so that we amplify it? You see, business does not need government's permission to do good things. We can do it because it's the right thing to do. We can do it because it means something to us. We can do it because the beginning of wisdom is planting trees, the shade of which you know you're not going to enjoy its shade. Digging wells that will not personally quench your thirst. Business does not government's permission to close the gender equality gap and the pay parity gap. In the 21st century, we pay women 75% of what we pay men for work of equal value. If you're a CEO, you don't need government's permission to fix that. On Monday, you go to your HR department, you ask for a printout of how we pay men compared to women, and we fix it even if it takes us 10 years. But it needs political will, doesn't it? Business does not need government's permission to pay small and medium enterprises in 30 days. We're beginning to measure those of our members who pay in 7 days. Business does not need government's permission to make South Africa to be a country of Rolihlahla, Nelson Mandela's dreams, the South Africa we have all been praying for. So if you're a government, we say the best amongst us, lead with a heart of a servant, because servant leadership is not a leader with many servants. If you are a business, we say we need to continue to do well by doing good, because when business does well, society generally does well. Because business can't continue to be an island of prosperity in a sea of poverty. When business creates jobs, it's not in and of itself. It's about creating markets of the future. Because there's a problem when your own employees cannot afford the goods and the services that you provide. And at a personal level, because success is personal, what are you doing just to reach out and lift as you rise? Not once you have arisen, not when you are already at the pinnacle of your own career, but in the process of rising. Because a greater measure of success is who we become in the process of succeeding, not once we have succeeded. Lift as you rise says that's how we find real joy, because joy is much more meaningful than just happiness, which is transient. Lift as you rise says there is no exercise greater for the heart than extending a hand down and lifting another human being. Because you see, nature is a wonderful metaphor for business. Nothing that nature does it for itself. Everything that nature does for others. That's why scientists would study as very funny a monkey that hoards all the bananas to itself when all the others are starving. And yet when humans do that, we put them on the front page of Forbes magazine. You see, in nature, the animals would never allow the dumbest amongst them to lead the herd. That's why rivers don't drink their own water. Trees don't eat their own fruit. The sun doesn't shine because itself needs the vitamin D. The flowers don't give off this wonderful fragrance because they themselves want to smell like Fontainebleau rather than Calcutta in summer when it's humid. So we have a piece of work to do if we don't want our children to disown us. By laying the foundation one brick at a time, so that we can look back and say, we were here once, and we did our part. Because you see, when one steadily burns the midnight oil, one gains access to the domain of knowledge and wisdom, the world of meaning, the world that cannot be conquered without a persistent crusade. The pandemic has taught us many things. One of the things it has taught us is when fisher women can't go out to sea, they repair their nets. We are a broken people as South Africans. We have an opportunity through these 750 days of national lockdown to reflect and go back to what it means to be genuinely human and repair those nets at a personal level. Key relationships, significant others, family and friends. Because you see, a child that is not embraced by his village will burn it down in order to feel its warmth. That's all the time I've got to give one or two sound bites, my dear brother, isn't it? He says I can bugger off.
Thank you so much. Great to see you. I have a feeling there's a third book under development at this point. Ethical leadership and leadership beyond self. We cannot be an island of prosperity in a sea of poverty, and we must lift as you rise. I've often had that conversation with my shareholders, and it really drives, I think, a focal point and an interesting engagement within our business, and hopefully it will do the same for you. I firmly believe, personally, that business has a critical role to play in driving our economy and our future. And I hope that there are among you CEOs and leaders who consider yourselves to be activists, because we really do need to grasp the nettle and step forward, given that, as we heard earlier on, there are people who are asleep at the wheel, who are leading us. Businessman turned humanitarian and philanthropist Mahanji is a well-known humanitarian who has dedicated his life to serving the world. His life purpose is to unite the world with the highest values of love, kindness, compassion, and selflessness. And he believes that humanity is the best religion for humans. Mahanji's philosophy is a lifestyle of purity, non-violence, unconditional love, and selfless service towards fellow beings across species. His core teaching is simply be you. Accept, understand, recognize, and express your uniqueness in the world. And as Brenda said at the beginning of our day, we are so lucky and fortunate to have Mahanji with us in person. We'll start firstly with a short video.
A life of purpose, a life of determination. The world brought Mahanji, another man amongst men, but a man with a clear purpose, to raise the awareness of Earth to that of kindness and compassion. He walked away from a lucrative career in shipping and logistics to pursue what his heart sought: contentment. He said, "Humanity is my religion. Non-violence is its law." The platforms he founded united and activated people of similar aspirations throughout the world. Now, looking back, the severe pain of the death of his precious daughter on August 23, 2000, totally transformed itself into an intense purpose: help the helpless. Spanning over 6 continents, touching the lives of many people, each platform is adding value to the world in its own unique way. As Mahanji says, true wealth is what we give to Earth, not what we take from it. This is the vision that today is carried in the hands and hearts of hundreds of volunteers across the globe, united with the common idea of leaving this Earth a better place than we found it. We all have the potential to make a positive impact. Join in this journey from humankind to kind humans.
Please welcome Mahanji.
Thank you. I think we have heard everything. I do not know. All the speakers who spoke just now have touched our hearts. And I do not have anything different to tell you. Consciousness in the spiritual terms is that which sustains the universe. It's called brighter than a million suns, pure brightness. And a piece of it sits in us. It sits in all beings, whether it's a bird or an animal. Any being that's moving, which is alive, has consciousness in it. We can call it soul, we can call it energy, whatever we want to call it. We can call it, and when it leaves the body, we call it a dead body. So that which sustains us is consciousness. Now, when we talk of conscious leadership, the onus, the strength, and the stress or the accent is on responsibility. We have inherited this earth only for a short period of time. We have two boundaries. One is birth, another is death, which we cannot control. We had no grip on these two. These boundaries are set. And while we are here in this space, how we behave, that's what determines us. We can behave selfishly or selflessly. And the degree of selflessness determines our relevance on earth. That's why I constantly say it's about what you give to earth, not what you take from earth. And we are almost, all of us are like here, like on a tourist visa here, just for a small period of time. The same earth was walked by a different set of people before we came. And in the next 100 years, it will be a totally different set of people who will be walking this earth. And how are we going to give this earth to the next generation? This is the question. And leadership, we all have. 8 billion people are leaders in their own way. All of us. We can never underestimate any person, and everybody has an element of leadership in them. But when it comes to responsibility over the country, over the people, over the world, over the universe, we have to be very, very realistic. What are we trying to bring to the people, or bring to this world, or bring to ourselves? Like all of us, I mean, all the people who spoke before me have stressed upon the same thing. And one thing I would like to tell you, when we live our life, each moment, that which expands us is good for us. And that which contracts us or makes us feel less is not good for us. I use this benchmark. That which expands you, makes you brighter, makes you more effective, like in the sense, like a self-esteem is high, that's good for you. But that which makes you feel less, like violence, for example. Violence makes you feel less. But we have seen, it's not that we don't know this. We know this very well. But some way, all of us have been indifferent. I was talking in one of the programs when I came last time in the television here in South Africa. And they were talking about the violence factor, etc. And the bishop was there. So after the program, I came out and I told the bishop, are we hypocrites? We're talking in the television about peace, and out there, things are not the same. We should do something realistic about it. And there are a few suggestions which I had put forth at that time. This is before COVID. And the movement was to unite all the people of various frequencies. See, we are all frequency operated. We are all frequencies, different frequencies. If one person cannot understand another person, it is not a problem, because frequencies sometimes do not connect. So I suggested the people of similar frequency should come together and give a difference or make a difference in the world. So uniting the entertainers, for example, to bring awareness. Is there a possibility to be non-violent in this world, in this country? And we can't isolate South Africa from the whole world. South Africa is part of the whole world. So we look at the entire world and we bring forth a kind of possibility to create a dynamic society which believes in kindness, compassion. And a few things only people with authority can provide: food, clothing, shelter. These are the basics. This has to be provided. And if this is provided, people are reasonably okay. To talk, to have a discussion, you need to have food, clothing, shelter. Without this, there is no point in talking. If somebody is hungry, you cannot talk about spirituality. You cannot even talk about anything in life. So if we are communicating with the world outside, we should be extremely realistic. And we should provide. That reminds me about one businessman initiated a political party. This is a real story. Political party, and he won the election. in a local community. It's like a province. And he made sure the food is supplied at a very reasonable cost in his province. All the roads were good. Everything was good, zero corruption. And he proved it. He was a businessman. He's still a businessman. But the political parties did not like it because there has to be corruption. They are looking for money, excess funds, extra money. So there was a lot of conflict. So he couldn't expand further. But he proved one point that this is possible. That we have to take the steps, what we imagine as a possibility, and prove it to the world. If we cannot prove it, it's not real. It's unreal. So I did not come here preparing a speech. I came to listen, and what I would like to tell now in this audience, there is a big hope now from the words of the people who have spoken before and the initiative Brenda and the entire team has put forth. There is hope, there is clarity of purpose, and I think this is going to grow further beyond South Africa in the world. This is the feeling I'm getting. And it must, it should. Because when, look at the last 100 years. Just take 100 years. How much of war, how many wars, how much of bloodshed, displacement. And the world has taken displacements as normal. I heard that from the United Nations also, that every country should be responsible and take on as many refugees as possible. I was thinking that he would say, every country should be responsible and there should be no refugees. Make sure there are no wars, no refugees. See, I would like to stay in my house. I will be uncomfortable if I am staying in somebody else's house. So it's the same. People from Afghanistan going to Canada and different countries, and the demographic imbalance apart from that, there is it's not comfortable. It's not realistic. So sometimes I think we are going in the wrong direction. There is a system imbalance happening in the brain itself, or we are communicating it that way. Second is the overemphasis on religion. Instead of that, overemphasis is on spirituality. What is spirituality? You being you is spirituality. That means you being authentic. It's not about religion or an external God or a philosophy or a theory. It's about you 100% being you, the most authentic expression. That is spirituality. And that everybody has. You don't need any guide for it. You to be you, you don't need to be trained. It's like you don't need to teach a fish to swim. It's almost like that. Finding you is listening to you. And also, keeping you stable, it also means you observe more silence. You speak where you have to speak, otherwise you don't speak at all. Patience, very important. But none of these things work when there is no food, no clothing, no shelter. So we have to think about this. Now, as business community, it is not that you are isolated to business. There is a possibility that so many other things are possible in the world. It can be done. And freebies are not a good idea. See, we've been providing food in many countries. 90 countries or so, we've been giving food to people who are hungry. This is okay. But I was telling them, they should not be complacent because we are giving them food. Some people may become complacent. They may say, oh, food is coming, so I don't have to do anything. That's not a good idea. Like we are working hard, there should be a kind of empowering them so they can be self-sufficient. This is possible, definitely possible. And as now we are working on the plantation of fruit trees. That was because the idea came to me when I saw in the COVID time, so many animals were on the streets, which they were in the forest before. They all came into the street, and many of them came, and some of them were shot and killed because the society cannot handle them, or they are not suitable for the society. So I asked a few people, and I understood that there are hardly any trees which are giving fruits in the forest. You see, in old times, when the American tribes, the original American Indians, they used to have these islands of fruits in the forests so that the animals were staying there. Birds, animals, they create islands, create, they plant fruit trees and they stay there. So the villages were saved. So we are trying to do the same thing now. We planted a few trees now, almost 100 trees in Turkey, and about 80,000 trees we have planted in the world now. America we did. So thing is that we can all do what within our capacity, but united, we are a force. All people coming together. It need not be fruit trees, like Sadhguru was talking about save the soil, very, very relevant subject. You know, because we have, the water level has gone down, the water level is subsided, soil is affected. In the matter of greed, so many things have changed. And it is time for us to take a step. So with extreme gratitude for inviting me here, and to all of you who have assembled here. And I should also say thanks to Amy to introduce Brenda. And thanks to all of you. So in short, what I suggest is that let us continue talking. Let us continue acting together, work together in our capacities, so that we have every point in time we are doing something for the world. And if this movement can happen, it can spread in the world, and it can spread in all the 190 countries in the world. And please remember, the 190 countries divided by languages, class, color, culture is a sign of human degeneracy. We are all one. There is no difference. Our hearts are same, our intentions are same, inspirations are same, aspirations are same. So everywhere we go, everywhere we see, is that all people need that love and kindness, that understanding, that unity. So the travel from selfishness to selflessness will create that effect. And we are all together in that. There are no parting words, but I would like to say, please remain healthy, happy, and effective. Lots of love. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mahanji, thank you. Thank you very much. So consciousness is brighter than a million stars. Consciousness sustains us. It gives us our soul, our energy. And what we do as conscious leaders is clearly absolutely pivotal for our future. When you spoke, Mahanji, about the million stars, I couldn't help reflecting on the last couple of days with those photographs of the black hole at the center of our galaxy, known as the Milky Way monster, and the energy that is being explored in the center of the black hole. And I take a lot of encouragement. I must admit, that four-letter word, hope, when I first started to think about hope several years ago, I felt it was a bit weak. I felt that if we're just dependent on hope, then it really is the very last thing that we can rely on. But I really do believe that we should have hope, that we should be focused on what we can do and what we can make happen through a heightened level of consciousness. And thank you, by the way, for helping advance my understanding of spirituality. Just you being you. That's just so powerful. So our next speaker is a virtual speaker, and it's Susan Taylor. US-based Susan Taylor is a transformational coach and who has worked with some of the most renowned thought leaders in the domains of emotional, spiritual, and leadership intelligence for nearly 30 years. Susan Taylor.
Hi, my name is Susan Taylor, and I'm really excited to be with all of you today. In a perfect world, there would be no need. We do not live in a perfect world. We are experiencing an increase in polarization worldwide. This divide continues to fuel either-or thinking, inequality, individualism, judging, hate speak, fragmentation, and endless discussions around who is right and who's wrong. At the same time, humanity is facing challenges that require both and thinking, equality, unity, openness, acceptance, harmony, and an intention to fully understand one another. From my own experience working with some of the most renowned thought leaders in the domains of emotional, spiritual, and leadership intelligence for almost 30 years, I have witnessed the practice of dialogue as perhaps the most powerful way to maximize our influence to co-create new realities. Dialogue is the gateway to the emergence of our desired future, where the sustainability of humanity and our planet can become a reality. Dialogue helps us to seek mutual understanding and harmony through seeing all others as legitimate, and why its quantum father, Dr. David Bohm, defined it, distinguished it with a capital D. Dialogue is more than just a conversation. It's a state of being, underpinned by principles, a practice with the requirement to do our inner work. In this, we enable ourselves to maximize our influence to walk new paths that awaken new potentials we couldn't see before, co-evolving to the higher levels of consciousness required to face the challenges of our time as we create new models for the world we all know is possible. The practice of dialogue creates opportunities for every kind of structure of opposition, similarity, relationship, and order to become accentuated. From this monad of meanings, participants seek to make sense of what is happening, searching for wholeness. And in this shared meaning, the very glue that Bohm believed held groups together emerges. It is from this place of shared meaning that new and deeper understandings are birthed. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to virtually and briefly share about something that feels so purposeful to me, especially given this most crucial moment in time. Thank you so very much. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Susan. And clearly we're having a dialogue. We're deepening our understanding. And I guess our objective is that by 1 o'clock today, we're more conscious, we're more aware, and we're more able to move forward. So we're now going to go into our first panel session. And our panel session is the focus on conscious leadership beyond COVID and into the future. So I'm going to ask our panel chair and our panelists to make their way up onto the stage. As they do that, I will introduce you to our panel chair. And our panel chair for the first session is Pepe Murray. And Pepe has kindly agreed to step in for Isaac Shongwe, who's been delayed in New York. Pepe is Group Chief Creative Officer and founding partner of Joe Public United. He is chairman of One School at a Time and the author of Growing Greatness and the sequel, 20 Habits, a journey towards personal and business mastery. And like Banang, if you haven't had a chance to read his books, then they are an absolute must and a valuable insight on many fronts. Pepe, I regard Pepe as the leading advocate and one of the most knowledgeable individuals in helping organizations to understand their purpose and set and expose their purpose. You may not know that he is also a closet Afrikaans rocker. So our first panel, over to you, Pepe.
I always get a bit overwhelmed by those introductions. It sounds so lofty. And then whilst I was sitting here, I WhatsApped my business partner and said, we've got so much more to do. We're nowhere. So thank you very much. It's an honor. It really is an honor, given who's on the panel. And the challenge I face now is, while I was sitting there, I realized a lot of my questions are not going to be appropriate because there was so much said already. And then I thought, in marketing and advertising, we've got the science that you have to hear a message 3 to 5 times just to consider it. So I thought, well, if there's some repetition, so be it. And then I did change some of my questions. I just want to check, is there a timekeeper, Adam? Okay, thank you. So we've got about 20 minutes, and I'll see how it goes. As an opening, I just quickly, if each person, and we'll start with Bruno on my left, and we can just move around the circle, just introduce yourself, and just your name for a second time, and also just your company where you find yourselves in, just for context for everyone in the audience, and then we move on to the first question. So over to you.
Bruno Leroux, Managing Director of Nestlé in the East and Southern Africa region.
Good morning. I hope it's still good morning. It's Angela Russell. I'm the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mikateko. My surname is Cheche, and I'm Vice President for Unilever across Africa.
Hello, my name is Webster Mfebe, CEO of the South African Forum of Civil Engineering Contractors.
Good morning, all. I'm Mohanji, founder of Mohanji Foundation and ACT Foundation.
So great. So I think two questions that I'm going to ask. I am going to expect an answer from each of you. And depending on the time, then the other 2 or 3 questions I'll just randomly call out. And I've got one specific one, which I was just following my gut. I thought I'll ask for 2 volunteers to see if everyone's willing to take a stab at it. So I'm reading this book called Happiness. And I know Bonang said maybe joy is a high expression of happiness, by, I think it's Matthew Ricard. And it's interesting in this reading how complex the concept of happiness is. So we'll start around again, and I am going to start from the left and move around because I think you may be most positioned to have clarity on the answer. But I want to hear each person's thinking on what it means to you to be a conscious leader in this world, hopefully moving out of COVID.
So I guess I'll start. And I obviously already had the opportunity of answering that question in my speech, but just to answer it again, I feel that instead of looking outside and expecting others to do everything and make our own impact in the world and be positive and leave the world a better place, and that doesn't need to be big, but you know, it will create ripples and hopefully get others aligned and on board, and then together we can make a big impact.
Thanks, Bruno. Angela?
So I think, you know, as we're moving into post-COVID world, I think what is needed is humane leadership. I think we've gone through times of, you know, control, command, you've got servant leadership, you've got authentic leadership. But I think in a world where there is now so much mental illness, or mental illness is becoming more of a problem, you could see that anxiety, stress it's how do I become more humane in my interactions? How do I become self-aware of what other people need? And I think that's kind of where we need to go.
It's fascinating. So that actually just reminded me, I did quite a lot of work the last 3 years on leadership, and a huge subject for me, and so much room for growth for myself. And I just heard in the last couple of weeks of the concept of sustainable leadership, and it really perked my interest, because I don't think we think sustainably in this world. Mikateko?
Thank you. I think during COVID, there was a lot of talk around never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think coming out of COVID, it's important that we really just hold on to some of the critical life lessons that we've seen. And I think certainly one that you've called out is about remaining quite human as we interact and really think about the best way forward and how we, I think as individuals and of course organizations and societies, really do try to understand what our individual purpose is and how it actually integrates and relates to the spaces that we are a part of, be it an organization that you're a part of, or be it a bigger part of a community or society that you're a part of. But what is that purpose? And for me, purpose really is identifying something that enables you to really be your very best self, to show up as your best self, and to feel that you are being seen, to feel that you're being heard, and to feel that you're being respected for the contribution and the difference that you can make in society. Thank you.
Beautiful. So almost, when I hear what you're saying, it's like this humanness, but also to almost rediscover our beingness, like, you know, that reason, that purpose, that reason for being.
Correct.
Great.
Thank you.
Webster.
One of the greatest leaders of all time, Mahatma Gandhi, once observed, this world has enough for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. In my view, Gandhi's philosophy defines the basis of conscious leadership as the type of leadership that is caring and sharing. And it also resonates with the African value system of Ubuntu, that I am because you are because I am. It is therefore, in my view, a state of mind by which human beings and leaders in particular are constantly made aware of their shared responsibility, not towards themselves and their families, but towards society as a whole, so that we live and create an inclusive and sustainable society together.
100%.
I believe the COVID situation is kind of a blessing because it forced us to redefine ourselves. Otherwise, it was mostly an unconscious existence. We were completely driven by our pleasures and things. But with helpless situation like COVID, which is across the world, we had to redefine. We have to redefine. We have to really put the things in the order. This time and space came by itself. And the result of COVID, which I have seen, is flexibility. People learn to be flexible. There is no choice. You cannot be rigid anymore. You cannot have your usual pleasures and usual habits. Everything had to be reassessed, redefined, and made flexible. So this is one side. Another side, what I have experienced, I have seen, is that many people became so frustrated because on one side, it is the loss of jobs and things like that. On the other side, none of your usual habits are working. So people became sometimes violent. We have experienced many domestic violence. For example, husband and wife do not talk to each other, but they are in the same house, forced to be in the house, and they have to see each other and communicate with each other. So many things like that. So in my community, we have been sorting out many of such problems. So COVID actually, according to me, it forced the world to redefine itself.
So I'm just going to pick up on that and not go completely on my script. Because when you started, I also assumed there's going to be this shift because of COVID. You said an interesting thing because the opposite is almost what I'm experiencing. I mean, straight after COVID comes war. And you'd think consciousness would have shifted. Now we're facing this massive war. In our country, we're facing so much anxiety and anger. But you're also defining there, you said in the same breath or in the same statement, you spoke to this other side of the coin that has happened. So it does contextualize it for me. So, and maybe the next question then is, it's so difficult to control all these external forces. What can we do as leaders who are working towards becoming more conscious leaders? What can we do, and I'm going to start with you, Angela, because you haven't had a lot of airtime. What can we do in our roles every day to be that change that you spoke to? Webster.
So I think, and I think Brenda said an interesting thing about people being subconscious leaders. And I think, there are a lot of unconscious, but a lot of subconscious leaders. And I think that is something that is so critical is, do we know ourselves? And I think it's how do we be the change that you want to see in the world? And it's by looking within ourselves as a leader, looking at our own past, our own stuff, coming to terms with that and transcending it. And therefore, you are able to be more compassionate with others, understand within yourself, what triggers me, why do I behave like that? How do I behave that's more beneficial to the people that I'm working with? And I think those are really important. It's to ensure that each leader is self-aware, and it is surprising out there how many people actually are not self-aware. They maybe think they are. Ego, for me, and a lack of self-awareness are the two biggest barriers to conscious leadership, and actually effective leadership. I mean, I think that is something that everyone needs to go within themselves to truly understand themselves so that they can be of better service to their teams.
I'm going completely off script now. So, so thank you for that, because it's so fascinating. I was asked yesterday, I could choose three states that I'm in, and it was sort of like hanging on for dear life and a sort of a middle state, and then an on-purpose state. And my heart, and in the end I said on-purpose state, but I realized often my behavior is contrary to what my being wants to be. So I'm going to exclude you out of this one, and I'm going to move to Makateko, and then I think just one other person just follow after that, or maybe even two. I'd be very interested. I'd really want to hear if you're also struggling with this at your space of where you're operating and how you're operating. You're already in that space way beyond business. But as for us in business, so the next question is, because we only learn through our mistakes. And I'll leave that one for later. But the next question is, what is your inner struggles that you're working with at the moment to become a more conscious leader? Because if we're going to be the change, it has to start with us. And I, for myself, can't say I'm perfect. So I'm going to hand over to you, Makateko, just for that one. And anyone else, just jump in afterwards. If you're working on a personal struggle at the moment, what is it, and what are you doing to become better at it?
So one of my personal struggles that I've worked on over the years, to be honest, is feeling that I can actually just be who I am in a space. And I refer to it as psychological safety. To me, psychological safety is an individual that feels free to actually, like I said, come as their best self. That means you come with your warts and all. It means you come with your strengths. It means you come vulnerable enough to show your weaknesses and areas where you even need to reach out and call for help. And I think in an area where we need to actually have more, conscious leadership and purposeful organizations, the one thing that I've struggled with, that I've actually worked with and actually brought others along with me on the journey, is helping people to understand the importance of actually feeling that it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to actually make sure that you're creating safe spaces for yourself to feel safe, but for other people to feel safe as well. And I think looking at how organizations have, or corporate South Africa Inc., for example, has been developing, I often wonder if there were more people in the room willing to speak up when they saw something that should not have been happening, or saw or even heard a decision that had been taken that potentially could have been different in any shape or form. If all of us were actually willing and able to speak up or point something out or call something out, how much of a better society would we actually all be? How much would we be as individuals? And I think that really speaks to us as individuals actually leaning into your own discomfort around being able to speak up, but also enabling environments to feel safe enough for other people to feel that they can actually contribute to the conversations that are being had, or contribute towards the decisions that are being made, even contribute towards their own learning environment, and more importantly also contributing towards creative and innovative solutions that will actually result in us being a more sustainable society. So psychological safety is something that's definitely been a personal journey for me, and I'm quite happy to say that I've brought quite a lot of people along with me, and I'm hoping today that I'll bring some of you along with me on this journey. Thank you.
Wonderful. So wonderful. So I'm going to hold with this question because you mentioned vulnerability, and then I realized I naturally just moved to the right and picked on a female conscious leader. And as men, we often struggle with vulnerability. So I do want to hear from Webster, and after Webster from Bruno, and then I want to go back and just check with you, and then I've got a follow-up question to go there.
In fact, I want to respond to both questions. But firstly, the personal struggle is to stand up like a sore thumb in the face of complacency on the part of others we should be working together to condemn things that are not correct. For an example, the guru of corporate governance, Mervyn King, professor, has pointed out that corporations or entities do not have a body to kick nor a soul to them. They speak through their directors. You have situations where there is an abuse of power by those who are in government positions, to be blunt, at ministerial level, who abuse their powers. Board members know that is wrong, but because they want to be darlings of politicians, they leave others to fight this battle alone. And the consciousness is to stand up, no matter what, if you're standing for the right thing, to protect an institution that cannot speak for itself, that cannot defend itself, that can speak through its directors. And again, as a lived experience to answer what it is that can be done to display this kind of conscious leadership, I'm going to give a case study. All of you have heard about what is the phenomenon of the construction mafia that disrupt construction sites. At the height of that phenomenon in 2019, 204 construction sites worth 17.8 billion were disrupted. Today, we have about 8 sites to the value of 207.7 billion. What made that reduction is dialogue, constant dialogue and constructive engagement with the business forum, young and agile, very brilliant youngsters who carry guns and go and demand participation. But I decided to engage with them, whilst others say, throw the police, throw the army. And that situation has turned around. Those youngsters are the ones who are protecting the sites, are the ones that are calling the MPA that is represented here, that agreed with us in a leadership that delegation that I led in 2019 to say, this should be dealt with in terms of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act. But what are the successes? The reduction in incidents. What are other successes is that communities, those leaders involved communities, now they are shareholders of a mall in Durban where community members are part of the trust that shares the benefit. When we talk about shared values, shared value must ask whose value? Not only to shareholders, but also communities must share in that value. That is part of conscious leadership in action. In this country, we've got absentee leadership that visits the country during election cycles only. When there are riots, they are nowhere to be found. When there are grievances of communities due to service delivery protests, they are not there. They only visit the country seasonally during election cycles.
Great, great. So that's, that gives me an insight, because I'm all action obsessed, but what I'm taking out of what you're saying in essence is constructive, positive dialogue does lead to success. It does. And that's something maybe I had to hear today myself. So thanks for that. Bruno, a struggle you are working on internally at the moment before I move?
So I think what COVID has taught us is that the problems we're dealing with are not unique, but are common. COVID doesn't have a passport after all, and doesn't need any visas to cross or go into any country. It's now even in North Korea. And that is also the case in a company. We need to be able to align ourselves, have a common goal, and work together to overcome all the challenges. And for that to be successful, we need everyone to be themselves. So it's this psychological safety, and that people really feel it, so that they know it's not just words, but that they really feel that in this company I can be myself. I bring my part of the solution to the table, and then together we make the best impact possible as driven by our purpose.
Great. I'm assessing from that question that the women are still more vulnerable, but But I take the feedback and I got some good insight. I'm going to ask you the same question. At your level of consciousness, which was very apparent in just your words that I was listening to, do you have inner struggle that you work with as well?
Well, I don't think women are the only vulnerable. I was talking to the mayor of Orangeville in Canada. They're the men between the age group of 40 and 50. Many are on the verge of suicide. Because job losses, they can't handle the families, then there's a lot of self-esteem in it. If a man cannot provide to the family, they feel terrible. And they can't cry. They can't tell anybody. So we were discussing what we can do in that community. So everybody is affected. It's not about gender. All people are affected. And see, we got to give practical solutions. What solution I gave in the larger community, we are active in 6 continents, so is that unite the strengths together. Various people are of various talents. Many lost jobs, some people have jobs but laid off or delayed payments and those kind of stuff. But in effect, no money. So people united their talents and then they bid for jobs. The advantage during COVID time was internet. That was the only advantage we had. So use that for securing some income flow. And that worked very well. So many people found their positions and seeming stability, not real stability, but relative stability with this, in this effort. So as I said in the beginning, flexibility. What we can do different during this time, and this is individualistic. You cannot have a general guideline. And also never look for perfection. Perfection is always a process. It's never an end. So the idea that perfection is an end itself has to be deleted. Otherwise, we can't move forward, especially in adverse times. So perfection you keep doing when there is more perfection happening. And I fully agree with the dialogue thing. You know, many times, instead of talking, it's revolt or revolting. You know, people are angry and they are revolting and reacting. That aggravates situation. So I feel that most of the things we can solve through dialogues, through discussion. First aspect is discussion. And then true leadership has to have vision. So any leadership should have vision and flexibility along with it. So that in this situation, what we can do. Immediately you'll find a detour or there's something we can do. Then collective effort. So there is always a room, there is always a gateway in all this.
Fantastic. So I'm going to call it there. I think our time is up. Just for my takeout as a leader amidst growing towards being a better leader, flexibility, vision, environments that create safety, where people can be vulnerable and they can actually be outspoken. And I almost think the most important takeout for me is maybe it doesn't happen as fast as we want, because I, for one, am so impatient, but that positive dialogue leads to solutions. So thank you, each and every one of you, and thank you, audience.
Let's give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you. Such great energy from our first panel and so many insights. Too many for me to summarize, but I do just want to say to you that, of course, there's no such thing as a free breakfast or a free lunch for that matter. And there is an expectation that you, our delegates, are taking your own notes, and that you may be aware that the key output of the Conscious Leadership and Ethics Summit is a report that goes to President Ramaphosa. And this is your opportunity to ensure that you have input into that report. What is it that you heard from the panel, this first panel? What is it that you've heard so far this morning that really you want to ensure is in that report that goes to the President? So please ensure that you do take the opportunity. There is in your pack, there is an opportunity for you to capture those thoughts. Please capture those so that we can really bring those forward. We're moving now to our second panel, and I'm very excited that this panel is to focus on embedding conscious leadership and ethics into the educational system. And if I could ask our panelists and our panel leader, and there is no better leader of this panel than Mark Lubner, the CEO of Africa Ticken. If you could please make your way up onto the stage. Of course, Mark is well known to us as the CEO of Africa Ticken and the chairman of the Smile Foundation. He is the recipient of several awards that include the Distinguished Service to Society Award, where under the guidance of Mark, the organization has made an indelible impression on society and young people by breaking the cycle of poverty, crime, and abuse. The winner of the Conscious Companies Awards in 2018, Mark and I, together with our partners at Company Brenda, who took us to that wonderful ashram at the Art of Living outside of Bangalore in India to experience a mind, body, spirit detox and a conscious leadership course. We have never been the same since that experience, have we, Mark? So please put your hands together for Mark Lubner.
Very good afternoon, everybody. It's kind of a tough act to follow after all those remarkable speakers. But I think the theme that we're going to address tends to perhaps be maybe a little more practical in terms of how do we look at education and what is the role that we as leaders can necessarily play in educating others to become more conscious. And as we all know, when we look at the state of the world today, in so many ways, there was a very interesting comment that Pepe made. Coming off the back of COVID, we would have anticipated that the world would be much more aware, much more sensitive, and yet we're immediately plunged into the Russia-Ukraine crisis and other crises around the world. Why is that? What is it that we're missing in the way that we educate others, and in particular the role that we as leaders can potentially play? I'd like to really start very quickly with an interesting comment that I was reading by John Nisbet, who wrote that the most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not come because of technology, but because of an expanded concept of what it means to be human. So ladies and gentlemen, introducing our panel today very quickly, I think it is important, if I may, to take that lead and introduce everybody so that we in fact can be a little more conscious about where all of you are necessarily coming from. First and foremost, Dr. Jan Bellerman, who really has committed his life to making the world a better place. And as we heard from you earlier, this concept of conscious leadership, which you run through your academy, where you create experts in leadership, consciousness, and culture transformation, believing that leaders will create the environment in which people are inspired to work and feel fulfilled by fulfilling the needs of others, by being in service of others. To my own esteemed Rabbi, Dovi Chazdan, who's Dean of the Torah Academy. And the Torah Academy, interestingly enough, stands for a school with neshama. Neshama means it's more than heart. It's soul and spirit. A school that stimulates the mind, strengthens the body, warms the heart, and ignites the soul. That's an interesting way to look at education, I think we'd all agree. St. Francis Tolang, executive of Nestle, which is one of the world's largest, if not the world's largest, food and beverage companies, known to be, as head of corporate communications and public affairs, a cultural observer, a commentator on issues that impact the youth. You're known for your views and respected for your views on how to innovate within the concept of youth. So I think you're certainly well positioned to comment on what it is that we can do to educate, as leaders, youth in a more conscious way of life. Christopher Greenwood, who is the CEO of Invest in Awareness, training programs for personal effectiveness and well-being. My understanding is that you look at life as an integrated whole, and in teaching people to be more conscious and competent, teach from that perspective. So I think we've got a really interesting group of individuals. And I'd like to kick off with a question that says, how do we know one thing's for certain, in a world where transformation, change, is inevitable. I think I saw a comment also by Peter Drucker that says that change is, in fact, is the only constant. The world actually completely changes itself in a period of 50 years. So how do we organize, to raise consciousness in a world that we know is guaranteed to be changing around us? And I think if I can start with you, Dr. Jan, your thoughts and your views. If change is inevitable and it's taking place around us, how do we teach consciousness in that dynamic?
Yeah, I think the only answer here is that everyone needs to learn to live with that uncertainty. So we need to deal with that. And if I bring this back to the education system, that really means for me, let's say, the world is currently, for me, not about knowledge anymore. It's the knowledge is doubling every 24 hours. So it's about getting more mature, that we as people can learn to dissolve our hurts, because I think happy people create a happy world, and unhappy people create an unhappy world. So if we learn how to master our emotions and our hurts, then we would not sit here anymore in a few years.
I think that's a very important point, to create happiness, and an individual who I was most remiss in not introducing, who, in fact, in every occasion I've had the opportunity to meet with, that brings that happiness, is you, Vukani. Vukani Magubani, NASPA's head of corporate affairs and public policy, and Columbia University School of Journalism, board member, in fact, proudly, of Conscious Companies. And I think every time I've had the opportunity to meet with you, you've always expressed a sense of harmony, peace, and joy. Would you agree with the comment that in a world that is changing around, those are the factors we necessarily have to focus on when parting with education?
Just to correct you, I'm now a retiree, so I'm an independent agent. And yes, you and I met when I was in my former corporate life with multiple companies here in South Africa.
Closer. They can hear you better when you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'm told I was not. You were not able to hear me. I think for your question around just sort of I think the harmony needs to begin with the person, as we've heard over and over again. And in some respects in my corporate life, I always felt like a fish out of water, because to me it was quite natural to have that humanity towards my colleagues. And it's really a wonderful thing to see that we've got a forum here of corporate people who are now realizing that consciousness and a humanistic sort of approach is the way to go. And I applaud Brenda, because her and I connected on that level many, many years ago. And when she came to propose the Conscious Companies Awards to me, in that corporate environment, I saw value in it. And to see where we are today, it's really quite warming. And my wish right now in terms of the educational system is that we don't learn this at this age, and we now focus at younger people, the youth.
Rabbi, I mean, you're a renowned teacher. How do you approach education in this world of change?
You're very kind, Mark. The thoughts of King Solomon so many years ago is, Ein chadash tachat hashemesh, there's nothing new under the sun. Now, how could he say there's nothing new when everything has changed? Technology has put us into a space that is completely different. What he meant was that the basic human instincts, the elements of hate and love and fear and anger and resentment and jealousy, these are the things that plagued people hundreds and thousands of years ago, and they are the issues that we have to master more than anything else. So for me, a school means producing students that are able to enter into the workplace with competence. So we have produced the 7 and 8 distinction candidates. I do not see that as indicative of what a school is. We get lost there. We think that if we can have our children in their pictures in the newspaper, 7, 8 distinctions, 10 distinctions, that's it, they've made it. A school is determined by being able to help the student that might not have passed attain their own individual potential. And that kid is going to need much more of a school than the top students who are achieving academic strength. So the first thing is to see that a school is not a place of academia only, not only about sport and all the things that are so relevant and important. It's about the values, it's about touching soul, and for that reason our school spends half a day, it's probably unpopular amongst many of the schools in South Africa. We only begin our secular general studies after 12 o'clock. Until that point, it is about soul, it's about touching, learning about ourselves, learning about purpose, meaning, why? Why are we here? And that gives schools the absolute meaning. And the students, the long-term vision and clarity and strength for their life. Thank you.
So you're an observer of young individuals and probably look at life maybe through a different perspective. Give us your thoughts on what is it that we're missing? What is it we're not doing in terms of the way we're educating young individuals? You know, 16 years, 17 years ago, I fell in love with the realization that young people, particularly township-based young people, impoverished individuals, have been exposed to a very high level of incidence of use of smartphones. And that gave me enormous hope, because I suddenly realized that there are millions of young people who don't want a Facebook profile saying unemployed, on social security. They want to be known. What are your thoughts about what it is that can be done? Give us some motivation and inspiration.
Thanks, Mark. I think I have many different reflections on this point, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but still covering a few of the thoughts that I have. So I think when Guru opened, he really touched on a very salient point around this collusion of technology. And we're kind of asking, and we are curious about what are the skill set required for the future. So we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, we're talking about navigating the VUCA environment, and that requires a different skill set. I think where we miss the point, first is in the framing of what consciousness is, right? Oftentimes when you have conversations with people on what does consciousness mean, it is a very reductionist view of consciousness simply being something very esoteric, right? Spiritual, not that there's anything wrong with that, by the way, but the framing of consciousness is something that is seen as, oh yeah, meditation, Buddhism, something very esoteric. And what that in turn speaks to is this non-realization that some of the issues, systemic issues that Professor Mahale spoke to, are really due to the bankruptcy that we have in ethics, in morality. And I think young people have a hunger to progress. Young people have a commitment to this country. But of course, there are systemic issues that need to be addressed. And so, in part, what needs to happen is there has to be a realization of us as leaders, of government, of society, to say, in fact, a skill of the future in navigating a VUCA environment is the ability for one to, be conscious, engage the conscious, be self-conscious, which are similar, but I would argue very nuanced and different, have the ability to be mindful so that we create awareness for young people, for society, for ourselves to engage in consciousness. So consciousness for me is seeking truth, right? And it's a journey. I think Mahendri spoke about. Perfection is not something that we get to all the time. In fact, I think it's a journey. Self-consciousness is the ability to invite the ego to introspect. And this is where ethics, morality, and I think that's the gap. So very long-winded, but I think part of the problem where we get it wrong, particularly with young people, is that we don't frame consciousness. We need to, as a society, realize that some of the very broad systemic issues that we are encountering, not only as a country, but as society, is due to this degradation or this absence or this gap. And we need to then be positioning conscious leadership as a skill of the future in order to navigate this VUCA environment. Because guess what? I think the future really presents some serious challenges on ethics, technology, morality, that we're already in part seeing now, and I think that's only going to get more pronounced in the future.
So as you rightly suggest, it starts to a large extent with self. But, you know, I've got a question, if I could ask you. Bonang made a comment, which I thought really stuck with me. He says, you know, on Forbes magazine, the covers invariably are individuals who've hoarded for themselves, have got personal wealth that's, you know, skyrockets. They're not the individuals who necessarily are living in service of others. So how do we educate in this holistic spirit that you adopt, when what society is doing is telling many young individuals who are growing up in this environment of poverty filled with various different challenges, that what they should aspire to is that, rather than necessarily aspire to life of service of others?
So this is, I think, a very good point. And if you look at education, I think primarily our education is training people to be employees. It's not training people to be men or women. It's not training people to be themselves. As Mahanji said, being you is the most authentic expression we can have. And from that, natural brilliance comes out, orientation, strengths, and also something which is important in education, and I think for everything, is acceptance. Because you mentioned, how do we handle a changing environment at the moment? And I think through acceptance that it's happening is something to recognize. And then also, something that doesn't change is the boundaries which Mahanji mentioned. At a point in time we were born, at a point in time we'll pass. In between we have something we call a life. How do we want to live that? What do we want our expressions to be in the world? What do we want to leave for our generations to come? So from that perspective, I really think that education should be tuned more to, rather than develop our mental capacity, is to develop our heart. Yep. We spoke about psychological safety, creating an environment where people can thrive, where they can be themselves. And so I think these have some good points which we can consider.
Jan, have you found in your experience of educating, developing others, that there is this, you know, irony, this conflict between, you know, amassing personal wealth on the one hand, and then at the same time being able to equally be of service to others? So the question really is there conflict in this concept of amassing wealth, ultimately appearing on the front cover of Forbes magazine, and yet can you also be that individual that necessarily is in service of others? Can an Elon Musk actually be somebody who educates and leads by example to showcase how consciousness can be in fact raised? Or are those individuals, you know, dependent upon their technology to create that change?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good question. I think what I normally see is if the people are successful, if they are achievers, they have achieved something and they have, let's say, a consciousness which manifests quite well. When they have fulfilled their wishes, normally the next wish comes up, and that's at a certain point, the higher you go in your consciousness development, it's about serving the others. So I think that's, for me, not contradictory, but it's just a different level of consciousness. You normally come in there. So if you look into like Bill Gates, for example, yeah, so he has achieved that, he has built the Microsoft, he has all the wealth done, and now he is foundations, he's supporting it. So I think these are the steps you need to, you will automatically run through if you are fulfilling all these wishes, because then the wishes drop off of you.
Please, Chris, I can see that you're bursting.
No, I realized that I should have come to that point where I was coming to. I think, though, it's going to be individualistic as well. Not that I'm on Forbes, but my journey through business was, I went through the education system, and I got wealth, I got position, and I had a direct correlation that my happiness went down.
Yeah.
So, what was wrong there? And then I'd had to do some soul searching. And what I found for me, through Mahanji, the platforms, which were now globally across 90 countries, people are coming together because they're getting wealth from what they give rather than what they take.
Amen.
So I do think that the orientation of our society of competition, of comparison, really pushes people into that track. But maybe quite a few people reach a stage where they have an internal conflict that now have acquired that, what else? So I think it has its value as long as we're looking at business that can utilize Earth rather than exploit it.
We've got 1 more minute, and I'm going to just ask the panel. I'm sorry, I didn't realize the time had gone so fast. First of all, thanking you all for the inputs. Would any of you quickly like to make a comment on something that we can take home that we might be able to do in our quest of service of others to be better educationalists in terms of being conscious leaders? Anything that we might take to our own children or into the environments in which we operate? And you talked about the influence that we necessarily have, just energetically. Quick run, literally 2 seconds, because we've only got 1 more minute to run through the panel, if I may. And if I may, I'll start with you, Chris.
Sure. I think acceptance of those people around us.
Acceptance.
I think modeling the behavior.
I think kindness.
People don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. It's about caring for people.
Learning to deal with hurts.
And I'd like to leave maybe a thought which is responsible kindness. It's important that we are kind, but equally I think it's very important as leaders that we take responsibility for that kindness to ensure that we don't create further dependency, but we create empowerment and that we possibly lead individually by the example. As I've often heard statements, people don't necessarily follow what you say, they follow what you necessarily do. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your time today. Thank you. Thanks to the audience.
Thank you.
Our second panel. Oh, so sorry. Thank you, Mark, for navigating the issue of how we embed conscious leadership and ethics into our education system. So we now have another virtual speaker, just a short video link from Dr. Paul Ward. Dr. Ward is based in the UK, and he's known as a consciousness whisperer and leadership coach. He is also an inaugural member of the Conscious Leadership Guild, and the author of the book, The Inner Journey to Conscious Leadership. Dr. Paul Ward.
Hello, I'm Dr. Paul Ward, and I'm delighted to be joining you virtually at this Conscious Leadership and Ethics Summit. I am a conscious leadership coach, also known as the Consciousness Whisperer. My focus on consciousness emerged initially with Richard Barrett's 7 levels of consciousness and an interest in his values-based leadership. This was also a feature of my doctoral dissertation, which was a research study into full-spectrum leadership. Leading workshops and coaching leaders on conscious leadership led me to writing the book, The Inner Journey to Conscious Leadership. It was published in 2018. I like to think of conscious leadership in 3 themes: awareness, intention, and action. AIA, awareness, intention, action. In the book, I describe these three themes as noticing what's going on, setting intention, and acting responsibly. I invite aspiring conscious leaders to continually ask three questions. What am I noticing? Inside, in others, and in the world around us. The second question is, what are my intentions about what I'm noticing? This is about how we show up in the world. And the third question, what responsible actions will I take in response to what I'm noticing? What will I say? What will I do? What actions will I take? So conscious leadership is about noticing what's going on inside and beyond, setting an intention for who you want to be and how you want to show up in the world, and committing to taking responsible action. So leading consciously into the future means being more aware and mindful, noticing what's going on, consciously setting intention for how we want to show up in the world, and taking responsible action. I hope this summit is meeting your expectations. Next year, I hope to be able to join you in person. And I wish you success with practicing conscious leadership.
Awareness, intention, and action. Sounds very logical, three logical steps. I've just realized my intention on this break, or this piece, was to mention to you that you will see in front of you around the room this wonderful little plant. It's called a speck boom. And you can see there's a card that goes with it that explains where it's come from and what you can do with it. I planted one of these, was it 2 years ago? 2019. You should see the size of it now. So where you plant it, make sure it goes into the most appropriate spot. But it is the most amazing and wonderful plant. And we have real thanks to the Owl Rescue Centre for drawing our attention. This is one of those actions that each of us can take that will contribute to a better outcome. So think about what you do with your speck boom. So we are now moving to our third and final panel. And our third panel, and if I could invite our panel leader and our panelists to join us on stage, is conscious leadership, social media and technology. Is it an oxymoron? And our panel chair is Michael Juden. Michael is a champion of governance and conscious ethical leadership. Michael Juden is a senior partner at Juden and Combrink and is a director and legal advisor to the American Chamber of Commerce, South Africa. He was also inducted as an honorary life member of AmCham in recognition of exemplary leadership and dedicated service. And I also happen to know that he is a big supporter of Arsenal. But you can't have everything, can you, Michael? Really great to have you join us on stage. AIA are the sponsors of Spurs, he says. So please, our panelists, come up onto the stage and take your seats. While they do, let's give them a big round of applause. Are missing one panelist, Stephen Mahoney, who unfortunately had, I believe it was a cycling accident or a biking accident at the weekend. And he's unable to make it. He's repairing. You may know that Stephen Mahoney is the CEO of Jump Co. He's now practicing the development of a business called Land Safely Co. But unfortunately, he's not with us. He can jump, though. We know that part.
I thought he was a silent whisperer. So.
Yes, indeed, Michael. But over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody. Aware of the time, we will do our best to get you to lunch on time. Originally, I asked Brenda if I could have an all-male married men panel. And the reason is I thought it would be so fitting that we give married men an opportunity to express an opinion without having been told to keep it to themselves. But I see Brenda broke with that, and it's wonderful to have Charmaine and Viviana with us. Welcome, Richard and Hussein. I'm not going to spend time on the introductions. Charmaine, one of my dearest friends, probably one of the leading young women leaders in the country today, shining light at Cisco, one of the world's greatest companies, and probably one of the most technology-savvy people I know. Viviana, leading banker for a leading Swiss bank. Richard, a software and technology giant. And what can I say of Hussein? As a South African, thank you, Hussein, for what you've done for us through the Mail and Guardian. I'd like to give you a round of applause. It's an absolute honor to have you on the panel. So, originally, together with Brenda, who instructed me, and Adam, I hope you saw, you told me last time I must wear glaring socks. Brilliant. Originally with Brenda, we sat down and we tried to create 4 very profound questions around the subject. But I'm going to break with that, Brenda, if you don't mind, because I think that the influence of social media on our lives, on the world, and particularly on the lives of our young people, where their lives depend upon how many likes. And all of what we heard today is irrelevant in their lives. It's how many likes and how many friends. I think we have a very, very serious issue to deal with, and to bring together 4 of you together and to be able to share your views with the audience is very important. So I'm going to start with, in this world of fake news, in a world where, and if you'll forgive me, newspapers tend to sensationalize the headlines. How does all of this fit with conscious leadership? I'm going to start with you, Charmaine.
So, Michael, you're spot on. I think the challenge comes in that technology as a whole, and I think social media has become so integrated to the very fabric of our life. And I mean, interestingly enough, it just came into my mind now as you were speaking. We did a survey with Cisco on broadband integration, an index survey, and over 50% of respondents actually said that technology should actually equate to utilities like gas, electricity, water. It's on the same level. And that just blows my mind. And we went back and asked, but why? How important is it? Oh, because it keeps us connected. And again, the definition for many people of connectedness has changed dramatically. So connected for many people is all of us sitting here on the stage, or all of us out to dinner, and everyone on their social media and showing a few likes and showing conversation. And to them, that's connectedness. So that true dialogue of how do we connect personally, I think that has been swung around traditionally to mean that we are all together. And I mean, it's even downgraded to a point of somebody sitting across the table and sending the person opposite them a message because they don't want to speak. And I think now more and more, we're having to put in so many ground rules around what you need to communicate, how you need to be monitored. And I think it calls to action the consciousness of all of us who developed that technology and the consciousness of those of us who actually use the technology and all of these media platforms.
I think that's so right. And Cisco, I hope, will be leading that challenge. Viviana?
I think it's very important that we start to learn how the technology works and stop letting the technology control us and manipulate us and actually work with the technology. Carl Jung said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will think it's fate. And that's at the moment what a lot of the social media is doing, especially to children. It's ruling their lives. But if you look how the technology works behind it and how you can make it work for you, we'll be much more in control. And our kids will be much more in control as well. An example of if I go out and I take a photo of an apple pie that I had at a restaurant and I say, I really don't like this apple pie, I can make one, a better one. And then the next day, all of a sudden, I have all these recipes for apple pies coming my way in LinkedIn, in Facebook, in Instagram. That's no coincidence. That is because of the algorithms, the technology behind what I've put out there. I've put that data out there. I've put that info out there. And I need to realize that all these recipes are coming my way. It's not a coincidence. Not that I suddenly have to start baking. It is because of the way the algorithms are structured. And it's not just words I put out there. Unstructured data, like photos, give so much more information than we realize. And we just put things out there and we don't actually think consciously of what am I doing. If I put a photo out there of me cycling with my daughter, and my daughter has very blingy, shiny shoes on, and you can see on the photo she's got a smartwatch, there is so much info out there already. I have a daughter who likes girly things. I have a daughter who has access to technology. They'll work out how my daughter is on technology. She will be targeted by that. So I think we just need to be a lot more aware of how technology actually works and the algorithms behind it. And we should try and manipulate it instead of manipulating us. And I think that especially youngsters need to learn how to use that properly.
Richard, you're at the coalface of all of this.
Complex subject, but yeah, I read a stat the other day that in 2013, 60% of your respondents were actually AI machines, not people. And I think that now, if you take AI wasn't even mature then. How many of the respondents today are AI or computers talking to you? They've got nothing to do with humans. Your likes and your dislikes are not a human giving you advice. It's actually advice coming from an AI engine defining how you feel and what sites you visited and what things you've done on your mobile phone. And it's weird because the internet of 2010 is not the internet of today. The social media of 2010, where we actually used it to chat to friends, is not the same thing today. And you will all know everyone is defined by about 10 apps. Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, they're just 10 apps. Where pre-2010, the internet was a broad machine. And I saw another stat that pre-2013, 49% of the links that we used and links that were used in court cases in the US no longer exist. So that thing that we thought is all broad and all-encompassing is slowly but surely becoming a very narrow machine to define who you are. I think it's really scary.
The press plays such a critically important role. How do you every morning bring together what the impact of that article and conscious living and leadership?
So, Michael, I think it's no secret that social media has completely disrupted media consumption habits across the world. And I think news organizations across the world from about 2012 up until 2019 were already battling in terms of how to navigate this new sort of advent of social media and how we effectively compete against sort of making everyone out there a publisher. And then and I think as a result, the sort of commercial viability of many media organizations suffered. And whilst we were battling and navigating that, we had the pandemic hit us in 2019. And I think news organizations in South Africa specifically lost something like 60 or 70% of the revenue stream. And we had a very sort of difficult 2 years in navigating the pandemic, but at the same time, recognizing that people wanted to learn more and needed to know more. And we need to sort of continue in our role as enlightening members of the public in terms of what is happening throughout the pandemic. But the important thing I think that we need to talk about is the fact that you know, platforms like Google and Facebook have been able to become sort of dominant as technology platforms in the field, in this whole sort of social media environment. And as a result, there's been a complete imbalance created by virtue of them being able to own the audiences, and as a result being able to generate better commercial revenue from these audiences, and as a result publishing and media organizations suffering. And I think this is going to become part of that challenge that many of you would have read about, where we are taking on Facebook and Google in South Africa, as much as they've done in Australia and other parts of the world, to try and understand better what lies, you know, beneath all their data, understanding their algorithms, so that we can understand, or we can help members of the public sort of utilize social media more effectively and more responsibly, so that we are also able to limit the damage caused by fake news out there. So this is what we're facing or grappling with right now. And I think that as things unfold, as we go along the rest of this year, next year, hopefully good will come from it in the way we are able to then utilize these new platforms, new technology in better informing the public about the truth of what happens, as we've done so in the past as an organization.
What I'd like to chat to you now about is, I think, something which we've been doing in the corporate governance world is having a look at the importance of taking governance to the nursery school, to the preschool, to the primary school, so that by the time these young people are through the education system into the business schools and into the business world, consciousness, good governance is deeply embedded in them. So the role of the parent in social media becomes very important. I don't know if any of you saw that lovely ad where the father comes home, opens the door and says, "We're going paperless. From now on, I want all the paper in the house thrown away. There will be tablets and mobiles. We're catching up with the rest of the world in this home." And you see over the next few clips how they become more and more technology involved. And it ends with him sitting in the bathroom on the toilet one morning, and he shouts to his wife, "There's no toilet paper," and she pushes a laptop under the door. Talk to us about the importance, all the suicide statistics we see of children as a result of a post on Facebook, "You look fat, you're ugly," taking their lives. Talk to us about getting down to really grassroots. We need to embed consciousness, good governance, all the things Rabbi Hasdan spoke about, into the children. Tell us about how you see that role and technology being married with the problems our children are having.
Yeah. So again, Michael, for me, I don't think it's all doom and gloom when it comes to digitization and adoption by different communities, because I'm still of the opinion that I think, you know, when you look at from organizations all the way down to users and adopters of these different technologies and social media apps, it comes down to the basic level of the consciousness, as I said earlier, of the people who are putting together these teams, who are creating these algorithms. And I think often something that we fail to understand is the full spectrum diversity that's required in these teams. So you often find that we're all in this rage of, oh, it has to be a woman, it has to be a youngster. But we forget about veterans, we forget about, it's the elderly, it's everybody who needs a say in terms of how should this algorithm operate. And again, when we're actually designing something, why am I designing it and what am I actually creating it for? Because often we think it's this big new fad, and when it's adopted by different communities, it then turns into something completely different. It becomes very individualistic. So often when I'm in a social media platform, it's all about, yeah, look at me, look how amazing I am. Look at my clothing and look what I have. And then it starts to form actually this void in so many people's lives that I don't have that, so therefore I'm less than. Or we start to create these little personas of, there's this new thing now on social media. By the way, I'm not on social media. I had to hop on recently because my kids are growing up so quickly and I had to try and figure out how do I track them and see that they're being safe online. And again, those values as a parent of saying to my kids, I'm giving you this device for the following reasons. You have to be respectful, you have to be kind. There's certain values that you have to ensure that you display when you're interacting with others. And again, the sad thing is, for a lot of these youngsters, there's a new thing now on social media called, it sounds very crude, it's like, oh, look at my photo dump. It's meant to be casual, it's meant to show everyone that, oh, this just happened automatically as I woke up this morning. And yet I know it's not true. Some people spend hours curating that perfect picture. The baby's in tears, it's in a mess because the mother keeps saying, last take, until it's the perfect picture that you want to put out to the world. So of course our children are all observing this thinking, oh, this is the perfect life. People have tremendous lives out there. Look how amazing lives are. And actually it's not true. So again, I think it's all of these values that we need to embed as organizations like a Cisco when we put together these so-called innovative teams. Is there full spectrum diversity in these teams? And again, as users of these devices and when we adopt these different platforms, are we also equally sharing the truth to our kids and to ourselves and other stakeholders around this is how this technology is actually used? It comes back again to that decency quotient, back to that consciousness.
Thanks, Charmaine. The truth. Viviana?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I think we need to teach our children to be very grounded, to be very conscious, and to look at everything they see on social media and judge it with their own values. Is it true and is it kind? They can evaluate if it's kind or not, and they must check the truth. They must learn there's enough other areas when they see things that they're not sure if they're true, they must go and verify it somewhere else. So I think a lot of education is needed. It's still very new, social platforms. Many of us weren't even around when they first started, and they're also evolving. None of the social platforms, or very few of them, are now what they were designed for initially. So I think there's a lot of evolvement happening as well, and it will change. And I think, on the other hand, technology is so important, and it also is going to help us. It's going to be our savior, in that technology is going to be the only thing, artificial intelligence, that can give proper oversight. Because at the moment, these platforms, social media platforms, are all privately owned, and it is up to the owners to decide what is acceptable or not on their platform. There is no oversight committee. Who would oversee this? Do we put it in the government's hands? Do we then end up perhaps with censorship? So we need a very independent committee, and technology is going to be the only thing that's going to be quick enough to be able to have proper oversight, to stop things from going on social media that are unacceptable, for example, hate speech. At the moment, things go on social media and then get censored because we've got nothing that can quickly enough establish whether it should be on there or not. When we have computer-assisted auditing techniques that can, way before the post, can judge whether it's acceptable or not, we won't be seeing those things anymore. So I think a combination of oversight through technology and grounding our children and keeping them very authentic is going to become very important.
Richard, from a technical side, how do you see it?
Sure.
As an engineer.
Take one look at my hairstyle. We'll see who's worried. Yeah, I actually think we're at a crossroads. You know, I'll give an example. We got a quote from Microsoft the other day. We've been using Word, nothing wrong with it, Excel, PowerPoint. We've been using it for 25 years. 300 Rand a month per staff member, per team member. So we look for cyber insurance. And so the cyber guys tell us, no, Richie, you're using the wrong version here. You need the secure version. But we're just using Excel. No. Go to Microsoft, ask for the secure version per person in your organization. From 300 to 900 Rand a month per person. Now, you think that these are adults using technology and should know what's going on. And I'm trying to drive the simulation between what's happening in our businesses today. Data is being stolen by the ton. Companies are really, really worried at the moment. And now we move that scene into the social media side, where you've got armies of people trying to steal what you have on your phone, your bank details. And it's becoming really simple for them to do it. So we're sitting at not only for adults, but to educate kids about what they're doing on this device and what access that device has into your home and into your personal life, for me, is absolutely fundamental from every level, schooling, business, social, etc.
How can a publication like yours, Hussein, play a role in this? I mean, every adult goes to Mail and Guardian to actually find out the truth of what's happening in the country. But where do you see your role with children and in the education in the home of consciousness? And where do you see the role you can play?
Yeah, before I answer that, Michael, I just want to also point out the other sort of positive aspect of social media is that, when you do something wrong, you get caught out very quickly. When someone goes and performs a despicable act, as we sort of all got to know about yesterday at Stellenbosch University, it was immediately out there on social media.
Yeah.
You didn't have to wait you didn't even have to wait for a court appearance to know who that person was, to know his identity. And I know it goes against the grain of the criminal justice system, but it was out there yesterday, the name of the individual who performed this act, who the individual was, who the victim was, where it took place. So the immediacy of these types of deeds is possibly something good that does come from social media. And also then the public reaction, I think, also generates a level of awareness or conscious awareness amongst young people, because young people are then able to see or discern at a very early age what the difference between right and wrong, depending of course on the public's reaction. We're able to then see that if I do something this way, this is wrong. I should not be posting something like this on social media. I should protect my phone if I've got pictures on there or not to. So I think it's a huge learning curve, a huge learning experience, and also don't ignore the fact that kids learn very quickly. In fact, I think my children are far smarter in terms of protecting the data on my phone or on their laptops or wherever it is than what we are. So they understand and they get to grips with these issues very quickly. In terms of how the Mail and Guardian and a platform like the Mail and Guardian can do things better is simply by writing more about it, and it is our intention to do that. For many years we owned a publication called The Teacher, so we interact with teachers or educators across the country. We have a very strong education content vertical. So we do try and do a lot more. I mean, there's a lot more civil society funding available also right now for us to be able to write and to do more research into projects in terms of how children are engaging with technology. And it is our intention to do that. But, just to utilize our audiences. And we've got, 1.1 million followers on Twitter. We've got our Facebook sort of platforms that we do utilize to share a lot more about how children can be better equipped to be able to deal with technology as we sort of navigate our way through all this change that is taking place right now.
To the gentleman who just reminded me about the time, relax, there's nothing quicker than a lawyer that's not charging by the hour. I thought your story about Stellenbosch yesterday linked beautifully with today, because you spoke about the ghastly act. I want to end with the reaction of the young student who immediately said, "I'll accept the apology and forgive you." I think he is going to grow into a very conscious leader. Thank you very much for your time.
Let's give our third and final panelists a big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody. So much to contemplate, think about, and comprehend, I think, from the role that social media and technology has in conscious leadership. So we're moving to the final sessions of our morning together. And I'm delighted that we have another virtual speaker, and a very special virtual speaker. Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar is a globally revered spiritual and humanitarian leader. He has spearheaded an unprecedented worldwide movement for a stress-free, violence-free society. Through a myriad of programs and teachings, a network of organizations, including the Art of Living and the International Association for Human Values, and a rapidly growing presence across 156 countries, Gurudev has reached an estimated 500 million people. Gurudev has developed unique, impactful programs that empower, equip, and transform individuals to tackle challenges at global, national, community, and individual levels. And I was delighted myself to have an opportunity to meet Gurudev while we were at the Art of Living, and to have a special audience with him. So let's hear from Sri Sri Ravi Shankar.
Pandemic has taught us how fragile human life is on the planet. And it has made the boundaries vanish. In some sense, it has brought humanity together. And the time has pressed us to think ethical and to think global. This is a time we all have to think how we can raise the consciousness in the society. Unless until we educate ourselves, humanity has very little chance to survive. When there is a pandemic out there, we cannot sit and think about profits. We have to care for life. And caring for life can raise the consciousness of our society, of our people, higher. And the ethics is acknowledging human life is sacred, is precious. And the world is one human family. We are one family. We may be of different languages, religion, culture, ethnicity, race. It doesn't matter. Irrespective of all what we believe and what we are, whether political or religious, we must realize human society as one family. And let's care for our planet. We have to be more conscious about how we use the resources on the planet. We can't afford to destroy this planet, which we have to pass on to the next generation. And what type of society we want to pass on to the next generation, we all must think. Should it be a society which is full of conflicts, heartburns, disease and death, or we want to see a happy society, a society with a lot of harmony and belongingness with each other. Let's all come together, work towards creating a stress-free and violence-free society, a disease-free body, confusion-free mind, and inhibition-free intellect, trauma-free memory, sorrow-free souls. Let's work towards creating a happy society on the planet Earth. Let us keep that to the coming generation at least. Yeah? I'm with you all on this conference of conscious living and ethics. Siyabonga. Thank you.
Siyabonga. It really was an amazing experience to spend an hour with Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and we're really blessed to have his involvement in the Conscious Leadership and Ethics Summit this year. Equally so, we're also blessed to have our CEO of Conscious Companies, and that's Paula Abel. She has a passion for brand positioning and brand building. Her extensive work experience covers a number of blue-chip FMCG companies, including Tongaat Foods and Coca-Cola. Paula strongly believes in the power of brands and companies to do good by exercising conscious leadership. Please welcome Paula Abel.
Good afternoon, everyone. What an inspiring morning this has been. Thank you to all of you for being here. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to start with a poem by Langston Hughes, who was an American poet in the 60s and also a social activist. I dream a world where man no other man will scorn, where love will bless the earth, and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights the day. A world I dream where black and white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth, and every man is free. Where wretchedness will hang its head, and joy, like a pearl, attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream, my world. Listening to all the presentations from all the various speakers, I've really been trying to grapple with the idea of why consciousness, and have had many debates on this. And what became very clear to me is that all the speakers had ideas that are incredibly cohesive. So let's start. Consciousness is an awareness. And we heard from all our speakers that we are one. We are all the same. I see myself in you. I am because of you. I am my people. Because of that awareness, there is a change in intention, and perhaps even more importantly, there is a change in behavior. We also heard that we are always making a difference. When we are conscious, we focus on making that difference a positive one. As we build consciousness, we increase the positive impact on people, communities, and the planet. Mohanji talked about the importance of being practical in acting. Bruno, your message of deeds, not words, really resonated. And Rabbi Chazdan, your reminder not to fall asleep at the wheel, and that we only truly grow up when we leave the comfort of our ivory tower to help others, could not be more relevant to the world today. Mikateko, your purpose-led approach is truly inspirational, and in my view, Prof. Bonang Mohale's call to action to lift as you rise is the only way to lead. I am very fortunate to be a marketing consultant to our partner PrimeServe, and our call to action to work as one, to succeed as one, is really applicable to all of us in all the spheres in which we operate. I'd like to thank our partners, PrimeServe, Mail and Guardian, Nestle, MIP, and Unilever, and our associates, BOC, the American Chamber of Commerce, Joe Public, and Agni Media, who create all our communication material and all the broadcast material that you've seen today. I'd like to thank our wonderful MC, Adam Craker, for doing a superb job. And as always, I've left the best for last. Brenda, would you come up, please? Brenda, I don't have to tell any of you, is the most inspirational person. We heard about how we radiate energy. Well, Brenda just lights up the room, and it's always good energy. She really believes in the value that conscious leadership can add to the world, and we agree with her, and we follow her because of it. And she has taken this idea of growing conscious leadership from just a thought to what we see today, and it has had huge impact, and we look forward to a future where this impact grows and grows exponentially. And on behalf of all of us, Brenda, I just want to thank you for everything that you do. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paula. Paula, thank you very much indeed. And we are amazingly bang on schedule for what has been, I'm sure you'll agree, a fun-filled, packed, and highly educational morning that we've spent together. Two things I want to remind you of. Firstly, is that the President's report, what is the key outcome of our time together this morning. Please do ensure that as delegates, as participants, you have your say, that you have an opportunity to highlight what really was meaningful to you and you'd like to see included in the communication that we have with President Ramaphosa. And secondly, that the Conscious Companies Awards for 2022 is underway at this point. And nominations for companies to be included in the Conscious Companies Awards remain open for the next 2 weeks. So if this has really inspired, or if it's hopefully helped a number of organizations to really think about their candidacy, then we look forward to seeing those included in the nominations. So thank you. Thank you to everybody for your time, your energy, and your focus. I truly believe that with thanks to Brenda and the organization, this amazing organization, that we have extended and advanced our understanding of what a conscious, ethical leader is all about. Thank you very much.